Chapter 221 Hometown. Qing Yun Hill Foot. The high sky and thin clouds, looking up from the foot of the mountain, a canvas of sky blue, gentle breeze blue, boosting one's spirits up. Lu Xueqi watched for some time. There was nobody around, and obviously there would not be anyone who would realize that there was an exceptional beautiful lady quietly looking at the sky. The clear breeze blew over, her hair over her shoulders gently ruffled, brushing past her delicate and slightly thin face. Shui Yu Master's last instructions reverberated unceasingly in her ears. At that time, from Dao Zan's senior brother and Wan's senior brother's conversation, we knew that actually for generations, Qing Yun sect head reverends, while they were still clear-minded, would pass on this secret to the next disciple in line, and the generations of founders, last will, for Qing Yun sect's reputation in the world's livings, in order to prevent even more sins of killing, until the last inevitable moment, the succeeding disciple is allowed to kill his teacher. This time Dao Zan's senior brother for some reason, did not tell Xiao Yikai this secret. My assumption is, there could be two reasons. 1. Dao Zan's senior brother, before he decided to tell Xiao Yikai this secret, he was already infected by the Zhu Xian ancient sword. 2nd, it's that Dao Zan's senior brother is too overconfident of his own skills, especially 10 years ago that big battle, he had used the Zhu Xian sword and yet was not infected by the sword. Therefore he thought this time he would be able to get over it, until when the real devil spirit took over him, it is already too late. However, although things turned out this way, we as Qing Yun disciple, no matter what, we cannot stand by and do nothing. Tian Buyi's disappeared, Su Junior sister at a loss. I am the only who could decide on this crisis. I only hope that we can end things at the mountain and you do not have to participate in this, but if in the unfortunate event you find them below, you must take up this big responsibility. Qing Yun generations of founders, spirits, will definitely protect you and me, teacher and disciple. Lu Xueqi slowly opened her eyes, inhaled deeply. She gazed around, the lofty mountains and rivers behind, elegant, tall and straight, the distant mountains undulating in shadows, looking at it closely, dangerous rocks jutting out, gracefulness everywhere, picturesque sceneries towering through the clouds, rising high above the world. For Qing Yun, a faint warm smile slowly emerged on her lips. That mountain range was after all the place that raised her up. It had her respected teacher, dear senior and junior sisters, and the once memory. She turned around, strutted out, her white clothes like snow, fluttered, heaven and earth so vast, the firmament infinite, even unparalleled beauty, peerless hero, maybe we're only a drop in the ocean. Speaking of which, it was still the first time, receiving teacher's instructions and leaving the mountain, but there was no definite place to go. Although she had the important mission, but she did not know where she should go to complete it. The thought of it was also ridiculous. Tianya quietly in her hand, but there was no familiar feeling, or should it be described as part of her body, faint blue light, also withdrawn in the sword sheath. One person, one sword, walking aimlessly. Where should I go? Heaven and earth so vast. A trifurcated road in front of her. Lu Xueqi stopped. It was not that she was unfamiliar with the road. Within Qing Yun sect disciples, she was considered one of those who traveled down the mountain frequently. The flat road ahead of her, she had walked past it countless times. It was the most convenient path out from Qing Yun Hill, leading directly to the biggest city below Qing Yun Hill, Heyong City. And the other split road looked unused for a long time, wild grasses growing over it. Only a part of the road could be seen near the trifurcation. Looking ahead, the further parts of it were already taken over by weeds. Actually, this kind of small trail mountain path, countless of it from Qing Yun Hill, many were created out from villagers living near the foot of the mountain, gathering firewoods or harvesting wild fruits for a living. There were many paths too, due to various reasons, after a long time, also became abandoned like this. This road, who knows where it would lead to, and who would remember, who had once walked past. Lu Xueqi shook her head, laughed bitterly in her heart. Ever since from the southern border, separated from that person, her heart had really changed greatly. She gently flung her head, wanted to throw the thoughts away, was about to once again continue her journey. At this time, groups of about 2 or 3 villagers walked over, a mix of old and young. Looking at their clothing, mostly carried axes with ropes and poles, looked like they were from the surrounding villages and about to travel up the mountain to gather firewoods. When they came near, the woodcutters saw Lu Xueqi and quickly stepped aside to make way, their expressions respectful. Qing Yun sect disciples were respected within these several hundred miles. Furthermore, with Lu Xueqi's exceptional beauty, surreal like fairy, it made them even more afraid to view directly. Lu Xueqi stopped, nodded at them, considered to have returned their courtesy. She was about to leave. At this moment, an elderly woodcutter whose hair had turned white but still looking hale and hearty, with an enthusiastic look, he laughed said, "Miss, don't you know the way?" Lu Xueqi paused, her eyes looking around, saw that elderly woodcutter, hesitated, shook her head slightly. Before she could speak, that enthusiastic elderly already spoke. "I knew you. These Qingyun sect skilled artists are powerful, flying here and there most of the times, but to talk about the road under the feet, sometimes might not be more familiar than us these villagers." The other woodcutters heard it, also laughed. Lu Xueqi saw their kind faces. For some reason, her heart felt warm. The stride that she was about to take, once again stopped. The elderly woodcutter laughed and said, "The big road in front of you is going to the Heyong city, which is on the south. That is the most bustling place within 100 miles here. When you reach there, it is much easier to travel to other places." After speaking, he pointed to that abandoned path, said, "That path, you better avoid it. Many years ago it was a lively village, but now it is all destroyed, there is nobody." Lu Xueqi smiled and said, "I understand, many thanks, old gentleman." The elderly woodcutter waved his hand, he laughed and continued on with his group. At the same time, another woodcutter who looked slightly younger, sighed and said, "There was actually a temple in that village. I heard it was quite spiritual. 10 years ago I went with my wife to pray for a son from the Buddha, and we really have a child after that. Pity now that it is also gone." The elderly woodcutter nodded and said, "Yes, I too remembered. It is really a pity that the temple is gone." The words gradually turned low and deep. Their figures also gradually disappeared into the forest. In the light breeze that blew over from the distance, seemed to contain sounds of their hearty laughter. Lu Xueqi turned over, her smile still on her face. For some reason, her mood seemed to have improved. Smiling, she looked up and strutted, heading for the big road. Her footsteps initially was light and quick, but for some reason, it suddenly became slow. Her elegant brows, frowning slightly, deep in her heart, something important seemed to brush past, but she did not catch it for the moment. Deep inside her memory, there seemed to be something, quietly awakening. She stopped, unmoving. The scene just now, replayed quickly in her mind. The woodcutter's words, again reverberated, "That path, you better avoid it. Many years ago it was a lively village, but now it is all destroyed, there is nobody. There was actually a temple in that village, I heard it was quite spiritual." Lu Xueqi suddenly shook. The next moment, she slowly turned around, once again, headed for that abandoned path, the small path that was already neglected in the shadows of time. 10 years of time, how much would it change? Face, feelings, or hatred? Nobody could understand another, and at times even oneself also could not really understand. But only this road, really truly changed. Because there wasn't any road here anymore. The verdant weeds, grew year after year, concealing the past history, witnessed time's heartlessness. Until a solitary white figure, quietly walked past the dust-covered place. In the wild vegetation, ruins could still be seen. In the breeze blowing in the face, the once blood stench was long gone, leaving only sentimental fragrance of the wild grasses. Walking past one after another broken doors, looking at things in disorder, the stone stairs and walls covered by mosses quietly, the laughter and smiles when alive, the happiness once had it all scattered with the wind. Lu Xueqi's face turned slightly pale, her long elegant hand held Tianya tighter. This derelict village, there seemed to be a pair of eyes, quietly watching her. She even had a feeling of suffocation. But she did not stop, quietly walked on, walked past every house. How long has time passed? How still remembered these people? Until she saw that broken temple. Different from the surroundings, around the dilapidated temple, for some reason, grasses did not grow. To say it was a house, actually it would be more appropriate to say a few pillars, just that they all had fallen onto the ground, a few broken pieces. It still had the shape of the deity, which led her to identify what was previously there. Lu Xueqi slowly walked over. There was no wild grasses, no mosses, everything here seemed so out of place. Not knowing what the reason was, even the resilient wild grasses did not wish to invade here. Or it should be said, the once enmity and hatred had all gathered at this place. Then during late-night silence, would there be someone crying and whispering, telling the past? Lu Xueqi suddenly turned around, not knowing since when, tears glittered in her eyes. Grass Temple Village, the place which had long been annihilated. She at the corner, quietly sat down, unmoving, as if quietly listening to something, or maybe feeling something. From the distance the wind blew, ruffling her black hair, gently floating at the edge. The sun rose and moon descended, morning and evening, day and night, from dawn to dusk, stars and constellations change unpredictably. In the firmament the clouds looking like garments a moment and grey dogs the next, faded away like meteor, time like water, eventually leaving like this so resolutely, never ever staying for anyone. In the distant wild vegetation, insects' cries were heard, other than the wind, that was the most vitality sound in this place. Maybe, in another 10 years, this might once again turn into a flourishing place. Or maybe, it might remain unchanged. But who would care? 3 days already, Lu Xueqi at this desolate place, sat quietly for 3 days, the constraints of the world, important heavy responsibility, yet actually it was only at a place like this, that she could escape and breathe. Quietly, treating it as indulging herself once, allowing herself to hide away. However, eventually she still have to go. White clothes moved, appearing quietly, Lu Xueqi's figure, again appeared, leaving that dilapidated temple, once again walking past the ruins of small houses and doors, for some reason, in her gaze, it seemed to already contain a reluctant deep sentiment. In the far horizon, the clouds drifted, in the layer of clouds, like wind had blew past, a white line quietly streaked past the sky. Lu Xueqi took a last glance at the houses, turned and left, never turning back again. That figure in fluttering white clothes, quietly went far from the overgrown weeds. In the firmament, it was still silence in the clouds. Just that from the clouds, a faint glint again swiftly swept out, silent and fast, trailing a few lingering white clouds, dispersed in the sky. Very quickly, this glint landed on this abandoned small village. Gee, gee. Familiar monkey cries, the three-eyed gray monkey jumped onto the ground, peered around, clearly coming to this outdoor place, the feeling of happiness far surpassed being deep inside majestic Fox Mountain. Not a moment later, the monkey ran off by itself, scurried into the wild vegetation, not knowing where it had ran off to play. Ghost Li, still standing silently in the center of the village, his face expressionless. Other than his gaze, the exhaustion and anguish that were unable to conceal. He stared dazedly at the surroundings, slowly turned around, the familiar place, everything started to surface slowly in his mind, even the breeze, also carried a familiar smell. The hometown's ground fragrance, and far behind him, behind in the verdant wild vegetation, that white and lonely figure, finally disappeared in the far distance. He slowly walked, the same scenes reflected in Lu Xueqi's eyes appeared before him, the broken walls ruins, moss-covered stone steps, finally, that dilapidated small temple. Just that he did not walk over, watching it from a distance, he stared in a blank, there, changed a youth's life. He stood for a long time, also watched for a long time, but eventually did not walk over. After a very long time, he turned around, stepped over the grasses, with difficulty he could still make out the path between the houses. He walked very slowly, almost every step was extremely heavy, until the second row third small house, he stopped. This house was no different from the other houses, windows and doors too broken off, the same abandoned and deserted, even the mosses on the steps, seemed to be much more than other houses. Ghost Li's lips started to tremble. For many years, this was the first time he could not contain his tears. Slowly, he knelt before the house, his head buried deeply on the ground, wild grasses before the house. The wind carried, choked, struggling whispers, father, mother. Heyang City. After the catastrophe, Heyang City was heavily hit, countless of death and injured, but after the calamity, the days still have to go on. The people coming to the city from all directions, also refugees returning home, gradually made this ancient city lively again. On the main road that was the most bustling, the best inn in the whole of Heyang City, was still that Shanghai garden that Zhang Xiaofan once stayed when he first traveled down the mountain, although because of the calamity, it seemed much cold and cheerless as compared to its business 10 years ago. After all, the people have just escaped death, rarely they would have the mood to come and have a feast here. But this day, a strange customer came to Shanghai garden. This person was a young lady, looked captivating. Not only that, underneath that beautiful face, every frown and every smile, had a soul-captivating strange feeling, as if as long as the lady's eyes swept past, the surrounding men's bones would turn limp. That woman was, after the drastic event in southern border, separated from Ghost Li, Lu Xueqi, the nine-tailed celestial fox, Xiao Bai. She like that confidently, walking slowly and looking shy, walked into Shanghai Garden Tavern. For a moment, from the shopkeeper to waiter, including the only 2 tables of customers, were dumbfounded. Nobody came up to serve her. Fortunately Xiao Bai was already used to this, was not angry, only smiled, said, "Nobody serving." Her words woke the people. The shopkeeper was after all older, with effort still maintained some degree of composure, quickly focused himself and then hit the back of the waiter's head, who was still in a daze, angrily said, "Customer is here, why aren't you receiving?" The waiter staggered, not knowing if he was feeling guilty, did not dare to meet Xiao Bai's eyes, smiled, stammering said, "Miss, do you want to have a meal or are you staying?" Xiao Bai thought for a while, said, "Better to have some food first, do you have private seats here?" The waiter nodded, said, "Yes, please come upstairs." Xiao Bai nodded, headed up, saying, "Find me a quiet seat near the window." The waiter smiled and said, "Miss, be assured, you are the only one in the private seats upstairs, whichever seat you want we will give it to you, and guarantee it would be quiet, there won't be anyone disturbing you." Xiao Bai was surprised, said, "Why aren't there anyone? I heard the business was quite good in the past." The waiter had reached the second level by this time, smiled bitterly and said, "Who said it wasn't? The business initially was really good, the entire Hyang city all came to feast at our place here. But goddamn, the demon beast calamity caused panic everywhere, in the end there were countless dead and wounded, at this time, there won't be many who would think to come here." Xiao Bai slowly nodded, gently sighed, said, "So it turned out to be like this, it is no wonder then." By now, the waiter had already led Xiao Bai to a table beside the window and was wiping the table with a cloth he was carrying. Xiao Bai looked out the window, saw the passers-by walking to and fro, it was still considered lively but few of them have smiles on their faces, instead most were frowning. Xiao Bai was silent for a moment, suddenly asked the waiter, "Waiter, I want to ask you something, you answer me honestly." The waiter nodded, said, "Miss, please ask." Xiao Bai hesitated, said, "All of the commoners in this Hyang city, naturally also including you, all hated that demon beast." The waiter snorted, immediately revealed resentment, loudly said, "Of course, the city in this calamity, 9 houses out of 10 were stripped bare, you can go ask anyone on the streets, I guarantee you that they would have loved ones who died under that demon beast evil claws. Pity that we commoners do not have weapons, unable to fight back, but luckily we have the Immortals from Qingyun Hill, showing great benevolence, displaying their great divine might, chased that goddamn evil beast away, allowing us to once again live a normal life." Xiao Bai watched that waiter's agitated expression, bitterly laughed in her heart, for some reason that subdued devil cave again flashed before her eyes, the hunched man breathing his last breath before the fire. The rights and wrongs in this world, who could say it clearly? The waiter seemed to sense that he had somewhere lost control of himself, turned red and stepped back, in a low voice said, This I am also just casually speaking, miss, don't treat it as real, do you want to order some food?" Xiao Bai smiled and said, "All right, but don't have to take down any specific orders, you go down and tell the shopkeeper, bring 3 or 4 of your best dishes will do, and also, bring 10 pots of your good wine up." The waiter was stunned, 10 pots. Xiao Bai glanced at him, nodded and said, 10 pots. The waiter paused, then hesitated for a long while, quietly asked, "Miss, do you still have friends coming? If you have, I can prepare more cutlery sets in advance." Xiao Bai laughed and said, "Don't think too much, there is only me, I want 10 pots of wine, quickly serve it up, don't ask any more." The waiter replied yes and successively and retreated, but his eyes revealed his disbelief. Actually he could not be blamed, normally people could only manage 1 or 2 pots, those that could drink 4 or 5 were either drunkards or wine celestial beings, but this extremely coquettish lady clearly could not be defined as normal. Due to the low volume of customers, soon, the waiter brought up dishes and placed it on the table, and the 10 pots of wine engraved with Shanghai garden words, in a short while, were also placed orderly on the other side of the table. This was also fortunately at a time where the Tarvan did not have much business, if not wouldn't it attract a scene for all of the customers. But even if it was so, Xiao Bai most likely wouldn't care. The waiter soon left, leaving Xiao Bai alone. She poured wine for herself and drank, soon, a pot was done, and her face, slowly had a pink flush, there wasn't any sign of being drunk, instead it made her more alluring. I, suddenly, lightly, sighed. The alcohol was pure like amber, thin stream like string, poured from the pot to the cup, making fine water sprays. Xiao Bai looked at the cup in front of her, watched on the water surface, her reflection wavering. Then she smiled, a trace of bitterness in her smile, took up the cup and drank it all. The street outside the window, sounds made from the crowd of people walking past endlessly, bustling with activities, those sounds, seemed very far away, as if in another world. She took the 6th empty pot, and put it aside. The warm redness on her face, complemented her eternal beautiful face, in the pair of eyes, were still as clear. Always the alcohol making the person drunk, never the heart. Her white teeth gently bit her lower lips, alone, quietly laughed, then with a flung of her head, raised her hand and poured the wine. Outside on the street, for some reason, the hubbard seemed louder suddenly. Xiaobai frowned and moved to the window, looked down. With a glance, she was surprised. On the street, a lady in white walked over, her face exceptionally beautiful, like a fairy. Who would it be if not Lu Xueqi? The surrounding commoners were also attracted to her beauty but were intimidated by her cold aura, did not dare to approach directly, gathered and watched from afar, making all sorts of comments. It was because of this. Xiaobai watched Lu Xueqi, a smile slowly appeared on her lips. Life is really full of encounters everywhere, she half smiled and muttered to herself, stood up, looked like she wanted to take the initiative and greet Lu Xueqi. Just that when she just stood up, her expression suddenly turned stunned, turning away from Lu Xueqi, her gaze drifted to a secluded corner far in the city. A familiar black figure flashed past and into another dark corner, and the next moment, a gray but not unfamiliar figure, pursuing tightly. Xiaobai stared blankly at the corner for a moment and then a mocking smile revealed on her lips. Guess today is really coincidence upon coincidence. If I don't join in the fun, I am really letting myself down, and even more to that Shangguan old ghost, hee hee. In her cold laughter, her figure suddenly like apparition, disappeared from Shanghai Garden. After a long time, the waiter came up to clear and saw only an ingot of silver on the table, 6 empty pots, the other 4 pots, were gone. And on the main street, Lu Xueqi's figure, not knowing since when, also suddenly disappeared from the street. Chapter 222 Plot. The night was dark and windy, lights extinguished in thousands of houses, heavy clouds in the firmament, the moon was not seen, only a few stars remaining in the horizon, twinkling with weak light. The night breeze suo blew past above Heyang City, like a wild ghost wailing. It was indeed somehow chilly and horrible, recalling the calamity this place had suffered recently. The streets in the city and outside of it, not a human was seen. On the long ancient path, a few dry leaves occasionally blew down by the wind, lonely drifting up and down, drifting far away. In this deep night, a dark figure suddenly floated in the city, like an apparition, silently landed outside the city, swiftly sweeping towards the south side of the ancient path. Not a moment later, a gray figure tightly pursuing, on that dark figure. These two people naturally were the shaman demon and Shangguan Ce. From the southern border to deep inside the central plains, this pursuit has been going on for one day. Shangguan Ce with his deep enigmatic skills from Fenshang Valley, in addition with an unfathomable 9 cold ice freezing thorn weapon, the shaman demon had a hard time dealing with him but his own strange skills, each time was unexpected. In impossible situations it could evolve into different kinds of styles, made Shangguan Ce extremely vexed. Each time it looked like he was about to get him but each time he managed to slip out. If it was somebody else, encountering such situation, most likely would have already given up. However, Shangguan Ce, carrying Fenshang Valley Master's command, the shaman demon most likely knew the secret to the southern border ancient shaman heaven's fire. No matter what, this was what Fenshang Valley was determined to get and so refused to give up on the pursuit. But this insistence was not all in vain. The level of their skills were displayed out to sea. The shaman demon was unable to match against him for the time being but the different strange skills that the shaman demon used each time to escape were all being observed by Shangguan Ce. Slowly he begun to have an idea, and now, when shaman demon wanted to again escape, it had started to become more and more difficult. This point, Shangguan Ce was aware of it, the shaman demon was even more acutely aware, however even though he was aware of it but he was really helpless. If there was any tricks to lose this hateful person, he would have used it long along this 1,000 miles pursuit but Shangguan Ce was someone with a reputation for almost 100 of years, he was even an influential figure in southern border, his skills, cultivation, knowledge and experience, all were top-notch, far surpassing Li Xuan and the rest of the second-generation disciples. Although the shaman demon repeatedly displayed strange skills but each and every were seen through by him, at most deceiving him for only a moment, escaping for a distance but not long after, eventually he was still being pursued. Actually Shangguan Ce, or should say Fenshang Valley Yun Yilan's determination to capture himself back, the shaman demon in the few exchanges of conversations with Shangguan Ce, long understood it but to him, he was determined not to be caught without trying. This night, looking as Shangguan Ce was getting closer, and ahead after the ancient path receded swiftly, areas with mountains were sparse, instead the land gradually was flat and wide, a stretch of wilderness appeared. At this kind of place, where could he still run to? The shaman demon laughed bitterly behind his black veil, exerted strength and brushed over, but the swift wind sound behind him was getting near and nearer. And when he was at his wit's end, suddenly he seemed to have discovered something, twisted his head and looked to the side. He was known as the shaman demon. From his nickname one could guess what kind of skills he was specialized in. Furthermore, his body was different from a normal person. Towards spirits and ghosts' energies, he was 10 times more sensitive than a normal cultivated artist. Still on the main street ancient path, while fleeing, he could sharply sense that in a remote area at one side of the path, there was a deep dark ghost energy emitting out from a far distance. The shaman demon was overjoyed, did a quick turn in the air and with swift speed swept over to the wilderness. Sheng Guanxi snorted, like a duckweed, with a drift and swing, extremely at ease, easily turned and again pursued with speed. Just that with this slight delay, the shaman demon again gained some distance, his figure also appeared slightly blur. Sheng Guanxi was not overly worried, pursuing for so long, he had more or less had an idea of this shaman demon's skills, expected that he couldn't make any tricks out. Right now, he was feeling more like a cat catching a mouse. Exerting huge amounts of energy, pursuing for thousands of miles, consuming effort and mentally, see how I would punish you when I get you. Sheng Guanxi coldly laughed, with a confidence that he had the situation under his control, in a relaxed mood continued to pursue. Soon, the thing that appeared before the shaman demon confirmed his surmise. This was indeed an extremely yin place, known as Morgan Central Plains. It was also a place where corpses were temporarily stored before being buried, but looking at the state of this small house, most likely it had been abandoned for a very long time. The shaman demon couldn't help but feel disappointment. His intention was, as this morgue was heavy with yin energy, it was an excellent place to use most of his unusual skills, but the morgue which was abandoned for a long time, the effect would be much reduced, especially those skills similar to Ghost Way, which could control the corpses. That was quite powerful, and along the way he did not have the chance to use it. If he could take the chance and suddenly use it, most likely that Shang Guanxi, that old fellow, would lose much advantage. Just that this morgue had been abandoned for such a long time, naturally there would not be any new corpse in there. However, although somehow disappointed, but to the shaman demon, this was the best place for survival. Immediately, without hesitation, the dark figure, Suo, a sound, swept into the morgue which looked dark and suppressing. But when he was heading in, a tiny thread of thought brushed past his mind. This morgue had been abandoned for so long, why was it still had such a strong yin energy? This night was dark and windy, the small house in the morgue was in darkness, couldn't even see his fingers ahead. However, to martial artists, especially shaman demon with this kind of body which was not normal, this darkness was not an obstacle. Soon he could see most of the morgue house. This was indeed abandoned for a long time, the thousand of holes on the walls, in extreme ruins. The altar ahead, which was meant to hold the worship items, had already collapsed to the ground. In the house, a few coffins lay in a disarray, some not even closed properly. Hearing sharp wind sounds outside the morgue, it was clear that Shang Guanxi was already near. The shaman demon did not hesitate. With a tremble, his hands suddenly had several strange-shaped metal weapons similar to nail, but the weapons were covered with metal spikes, and then without even looking, his fingers shot out, suo 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 sounds. The metal things all disappeared into the darkness, flying into the corners of the small house. And when every metal weapon disappeared into the darkness, a faint blue light suddenly was seen from the tail end, but that was only a moment, vanished in an instant. After which, the yin energy which was penetrating into the bones, suddenly turned 10 times stronger, as if it could really stab into the bones. The shaman demon sneered, glanced around, his body suddenly floated up, towards a coffin at the corner of the house. This coffin looked ordinary, the cover was not even closed properly, half of it was outside of it. The shaman demon quietly slipped in, the place where ordinary people avoided and felt fear. He seemed to like it very much, and after his body slipped in, the cover, which was lying sideways, was also pulled into position by him. The next moment, the sounds of wind stopped, the house immediately in silence. Sheng Guanxi's figure appeared at this house entrance. The shaman demon calmed down, and happened that the coffin was in a bad shape, a few cracks on the wood, through that he could see every move of Sheng Guanxi. He felt even more conceited. As long as Sheng Guanxi didn't notice and walked 2 more steps into the center, he would trigger the Yin Mei formation. Using the strong yin energy here, Sheng Guanxi would definitely could not react in time. He was anticipating, but Sheng Guanxi seemed extremely careful, did not rush to search for the shaman demon, instead stood at the entrance, carefully peered around, looked like he would not be entering the house soon. Shaman demon felt disappointed. scolded silently that the old thief was really cunning. When he focused again, he then slowly noticed the place he was in. Unexpectedly, the next moment he had a shock, his own soul almost flew away. In this coffin, there was another person. Actually, for the shaman demon, even if the coffin contained a corpse, or even worse, a skeleton, he would not bat an eyelid, and maybe he would also felt somehow a kinship, but below him in this coffin was actually a living person. And ever since he entered this small house till this coffin, he had not detected this person at all, not even the sound of his breathing. With the shock, his entire body started to tremble, but he managed to control himself with difficulty, did not shout out loud or jumped out of the coffin, but his forehead, back, palms started to sweat. The next moment, what made him even more shocked, was that he discovered, this living person underneath him, was not breathing, a living person with no breathing. In that instant, the shaman demon decided clearly, this person was indeed alive, because two people in a coffin, there wasn't much space to say with in the first place. With his sharp wits, he soon sensed that this person's heart was beating slowly, but for some reason, this person's mouth and nose was not moving. The shaman demon quietly stretched his hand to check. After some time, there was indeed no movement, this person was not breathing. The shaman demon felt goosebumps. This inconceivable thing was before him. The shaman demon initially wanted to plot against Shang Guanxi, but now that his mind was in a mess, he couldn't concentrate for the moment, his blood churning. Just that he was after all a person with deep cultivation, immediately felt something amiss, quickly used true way on himself, calmed his mind. Then, at that time, when the shaman demon was deliberating on what to do, an even bigger surprise, again made him dumbfounded, at a loss. The coffin, suddenly a light sound like something joining together. The sound was very light, almost inaudible, but in this small house, to these cultivated people, it was totally a different matter. Shang Guanxi almost at the same time, whipped around, stared at this corner. And in his shock, the shaman demon realized that this coffin started to emit a strange evil energy towards all directions. Threads like ropes controlled this entire coffin space tightly. With his powerful skills, facing this inexplicable evil energy, he couldn't defend. In that instant he was immobilized, trapped by this invisible evil force in this coffin. The shaman demon was almost scared out of his wits. But, almost is not enough. This moment, in the dark coffin space, he could felt the fat, living person underneath him, suddenly awoke, opened both of his eyes. The two of their eyes met, in that space, in that strange atmosphere, looking at each other. Then, that nameless fat person, that quietly, facing the shaman demon, smiled. Shang Guanxi stared intently at that corner but did not go to investigate immediately. Although he did not have the shaman demon's special ability, but with his level of skills, naturally he could make out the things in the house and at the same time with his knowledge, what kind of place this was. But he was not the shaman demon. Shang Guanxi had never liked morgue, this kind of place, especially to an elderly, he even more did not like it. At the same time, with his skills, when he first entered the house, he could sharply sense that in this house, the yin energy was not normal, it was far more than what a common morgue had. The shaman demon's speciality skills, he was clearer than anyone else, and in this place, naturally it was where the shaman demon most preferred, therefore he had to be careful. Shang Guanxi used true way to protect his entire body, carefully scanned this strange small house again. After confirming nothing seemed suspicious, he slowly stepped in. Just that he was halfway when he suddenly retreated. At the same time his right hand with a flash of cold glint, the 9 cold ice freezing thorn appeared in his hand. Old people seemed to be especially more careful. He finally headed to that corner, made his first step. Outside the house, a gust of yin wind blew past. Woo-woo sounds made one hair stands. Shang Guanxi on full alert. Every change in this house was watched by him, but the surroundings were in darkness. Other than silence there was still silence, not a single sound. He sneered, suddenly loudly said, "Old man, me has long known you are in that coffin. Old friend, if you still don't come out, don't blame me for attacking the coffin with the person inside, making you suffer." There was no reply, it was still silence. Shang Guanxi angrily humphed, said, "Playing the devil." After speaking, he did not hesitate, stepped forward, and at the same time his weapon burst out in cold silver light. Instantly the surrounding temperature dropped. But at that moment, a spot of faint blue light quietly flew out from another corner, covered with yin energy, attacked Shang Guanxi's back. Shang Guanxi was on full alert, but this dart was laid by the shaman demon, concealing its own yin energy. The entire thing could absorb the yang energy in the surrounding and covered itself with. Shang Guanxi with his deep skills, could sense every movement in this place. Although his skills was amazing, but he did not expect at that moment, it became his weak point, foresaw by the shaman demon, and created a sly attack. Shang Guanxi did not sense the environment was different, until when that thing was almost 3 kai behind him, the sound of wind urgent and great yin energy. He was shocked. In that instant, with no doubt of him using his deep skills, he immediately stepped forward, in an hairbreadth increased the distance, at the same time his weapon instantly drifted to his back. A flash of cold light, the silver light instantly illuminated the entire house, just that in this strange atmosphere, the beautiful light now looked pale, made one goosebumps. The silver light at the most critical moment, deflected that ghostly thing. However, without a moment to rest, with his previous step, he had activated the shaman demon's trap. From the various corners of the house, blue lights twinkled, several yin energies shot out, and what was even stranger, that dart he had just deflected, made a semicircle in the air and again attacked Shang Guanxi. Shang Guanxi in his hurry, for a moment was busy trying to keep up, but he was after all not an ordinary person. The weapon flashed with cold glint, where the cold beam pointed. This entire small house, almost from the rooftop to the ground, was covered with a faint layer of frost. And in this biting cold, the yin darts seemed to receive some obstructions. Several slowed down. At the same time on the darts, bodies, in this short period of time, actually had a layer of ice. Although their speed was still fast, but with that slowness, it could actually allow Shang Guanxi to recover, and immediately in the silver light, zung 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 sounds in succession, several darts were beaten to the ground. When they landed, most likely due to the cold energy from 9 cold ice freezing thorn, but under the ice, the darts were actually broken to pieces. Shang Guanxi had turned danger to peace, broke the shaman demon's trap, couldn't help but laughed out loud, bellowing to the coughing, "Now you no longer have any ideas, right? Still not surrendering, I will." Before he could say, "Capture," suddenly his face changed and twisted, made a painful howl, his entire body flipped out backwards. With a loud sound, he actually smashed through the wall out. In his back, a faint blue light could be seen twinkling. It was actually the first dart, not knowing since when, had avoided his attention and heavily injured him. The fight in this small house, the shaman demon and that mysterious fat person have all seen it clearly through the cracks, especially the last part. In the darkness, that mysterious fat person actually had some admiration, suddenly spoke, "You could actually wield that kind of ghostly thing and again controlled it. This level of cultivation is really rare." The shaman demon for the first time heard this person spoke, was shocked, but looking at his eyes and tone, there was no hostility. He laughed bitterly, shook his head and said, "You are wrong." That fat person was surprised, asked, "What was I wrong?" The shaman demon sighed and said, "Those yin things are laid in trap by me, that is right, but that last dart, was another master doing it, nothing to do with me." He hatefully said, "If I had that level of skills, I would not be trapped here." That fat person frowned, did not speak anymore. The shaman demon glanced at him. With just a few conversations, he could roughly sense the fat person's condition. This person was actually similar to him, trapped in this coffin, but what was different from him was, on this fat person, an even more powerful strange force was imprisoning his entire body channels. The shaman demon could not help but was shocked, from the force trapping him in the coffin, even though he was highly skilled, but it could actually immobilized him, but to this fat person, it seemed insufficient for someone and actually casted this fearful spell, imprisoning him. So does it meant that if this fat person was not imprisoned, he had skills so high that would cause fear? And thinking deeper, to be able to control this fat person, what kind of terrible person would it be? The shaman demon's mind was in a mess. The Central Plains Great Lands, a place where dragons and tigers were hiding, was really not what he expected. At this moment, Shang Guanxi's angry bellow was heard from outside. "Which master is there in this place? Please show yourself," attacking one from behind. What kind of hero is that? In the small house, the shaman demon and the fat person looked at each other. Obviously Shang Guanxi with his sharp eyesight, knew that it was not the shaman demon who attacked him and was someone else. A pleasing sound like a bell was heard, coming from the rooftop, with some mockery, sneering said, "Didn't you said playing the devil, so I let you see, who is actually playing the devil." The shaman demon and that mysterious fat person trapped in the coffin, naturally could not see who the lady was. Shang Guanxi standing in the yard, holding in his pain, looked up, suddenly sucked in a cold breath, coldly said, "It was actually you." That lady laughed and said, "Not me, who would it be?" He 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 he. The laughter was clear, with a captivating allure. In this sinister night, a slender figure sat alone at the rooftop, her features beautiful, her eyes like water. If it was not nine-tailed celestial fox Xiaobai, who would it be? Chapter 223 Wretched. Shang Guanxi only felt a numbing sensation around the wound on his back. At the same time cold energy constantly emanated from the ghostly dart and penetrated into his body channels, like thousands of ants biting. The pain was unbearable. And only a moment later, his forehead was damp with sweat, his face started to turn pale. Xiaobai, who was standing on the roof, saw everything. The smile on her face deepened, very much like gloating, smiled and said, "Didn't expect, right, old ghost, you too have this day." Shang Guanxi clenched his teeth, humped a sound, forced himself to stand and sternly said, "Evildoer, you still dare to show up before me?" Xiaobai laughed out, as if it was the most ridiculous thing she had heard, flung her sleeves, her entire self floated down from the rooftop, landed not far from where Shang Guanxi was, smiled and said, "I don't dare to face you." "Oh right, I am a coward, don't dare to, and so I came out to give you a greeting present, and then I dare to meet you. Old ghost, you incarcerated me at that inferno altar for so many years, this time, if I do not thank you properly, then it's really letting you down." Shang Guanxi was full of anger, but his heart was feeling some surprise. In the inferno altar, most likely due to the fact that the inferno altar was located at the earth's fire spiritual power, including the 8 savage inferno formation, he was then able to suppress this 1,000-years-old demon fox within. If not with her level of skills, he was really not sure if he could handle. Just that time was different now. The 9-tailed celestial fox had already broke off her shackles, and just at his careless moment, he was attacked by this evildoer. With his vitality greatly wounded, he most likely was not her match. Right now, the night breeze soughed above the wildlands. From all directions howling sounds like ghost wails or wolves' cry were heard, as if on this dreary late night, numerous night ghosts were crying at the same time, the yin energy high. Inside the morgue, Xiaobai and Shang Guanxi faced each other. Although Shang Guanxi was already injured, but seemed like Xiaobai did not have the intention to attack immediately. On the contrary, she only seemed interested in assessing Shang Guanxi, like a cat catching a mouse, mockery on her face. Shang Guanxi knew right now what he needed the most, was to find a safe quiet place, activated his energy to heal, contained the injury, but yet before him with this demon fox, it was really a fix for him. In his rage, Shang Guanxi hatefully said, "Since you insist to come and fight with me, why are you still not making your move, standing there only? What is your intention?" Xiaobai smiled, said, "I don't mind, it doesn't matter if I tell you. I am not like you humans, always lament that your lifespan is short. For me, I have so much time that I don't know how to spend it, and so I am standing here, taking my time watching you. Anyway, I have much patience." Shang Guanxi heard it, almost blew steam out of his 7 apertures. This evildoer clearly was delaying him, knew it well that he was heavily injured and yet refused to let him have a chance to heal, and as time passed by, he would naturally lose his life. Without waiting for the 9-tailed celestial fox to make a move, most probably he would first fall. However, even though Shang Guanxi knew it, but towards this somehow sneaky move by Xiaobai, he was really helpless. To make a move, he himself was injured, the other party was highly skilled, most likely it was hard to win. Not making a move, his injury would worsen and inevitably lead to death. It seemed like there was no other choice but to escape. Just that Xiaobai, with her captivating eyes, coolly watched Shang Guanxi intently. Even he himself did not have much confidence if he could escape from her. This was really 4 walls around, in a hopeless situation. Shang Guanxi's face was like ash, hatred, anger, fear, anxiety, each kind of expression flashed past. Xiaobai watched it, her heart delighted. She was incarcerated in the Inferno altar for so many years. If it wasn't for Ghostly, who unintentionally released the seal, she did not know if she would have to stay there for her whole life. Her suffering in there was really hard to share it with people. To Xiaobai, Fenchong Valley people like Shang Guanxi, she really abhorred them. Although after she escaped with Ghostly, she herself had some enlightenment and so did not deliberately return to seek trouble with them, but now that Shang Guanxi delivered himself up, why would she pretend not to see it? With mercy, be kind to people, all these were when the 9-tailed celestial fox was in a good mood, but she had too forgave others, with Buddha's heart treated them. Proud at the thought, she burst out laughing. So many years of grievances, seemed like tonight she could all release them. It was really exhilarating. Shang Guanxi's mood was naturally not like Xiaobai. Instead, when his injury was almost unable to be controlled, his body started to tremble, the ghostly dart rose, faint blue light enveloped his back. Xiaobai's smile deepened, Shang Guanxi's breathing started to pant. Suddenly, he walked a few steps towards Xiaobai, Xiaobai frowned, a guarded look on her face. Shang Guanxi, although injured but his skills were not trivial, Xiaobai did not dare to be careless. Just that inconceivable things happened. Shang Guanxi's face was full of pain, green veins bulged out, looked like his injury turned more serious, he was almost unable to tolerate it. And he himself, both eyes rolling up, a trace of face on his face, with a plonk sound, he actually knelt before Xiaobai, begging, "Fairy Fox, please spare my life." If Shang Guanxi made a move, it would be a phenomenal skill. Xiaobai was most probably prepared to receive it, even if he shouted and then 30 or 50 Fenshang Valley experts jumped out, Xiaobai also could accept this fact. But before her this old man who was kneeling and begging for his life, had upturned what Xiaobai's imagined. For a moment, even with her thousands of years of cultivation, she was also stunned, and at a loss. Just that with this stunned moment, Xiaobai already woke up the next, but Shang Guanxi with his schemes, did not hesitate to use himself, only for this moment of opportunity. In that instant, Shang Guanxi, who was almost dying, like turning into another person, murderous intention on his entire face, his pain had all vanished, even the blue light behind him, also was suppressed. The 9 cold ice freezing thorns piercing silver light appeared, like a sudden dragon sweeping past the sky, flying backwards from below his hand, straight towards Xiaobai's chest. Xiaobai with an angry howl, moved with astonishing speed backwards, at the same time her sleeves flew up, forming a cloth wall. But this attack by Shang Guanxi was what his entire lifetime of cultivation was, the force not to be reckoned. Seat sounds burst out, the sleeves which were the closest to the weapon immediately shredded to pieces, almost at the same time frozen, broken and fell to the ground. And the silver-white light never seemed to have paused, straight towards Xiaobai. Xiaobai was still retreating, but her retreat while in a haste, no matter what, would not be faster than Shang Guanxi's planned fatal move. Looking as the light was about to touch her, Xiaobai turned pale but did not panic, both her hands suddenly placed together before her chest, crossed and flexed out, forming a strange hand gesture. Shoo! A long and mysterious long whistle, suddenly reverberated from somewhere, the sound desolate and bleak, quiet and solemn, brought one straight into a mysterious realm. In the full moon night, in the wilderness, a white fox singing to the moon. The next moment, the 9 cold ice freezing thorn exploded with piercing light, a sheet of silver light flashed, enveloping Xiaobai within it. Shang Guanxi succeeded in his counterattack, but there was no concealment on his face, instead he gritted his teeth, looking very displeased. However, he was after all not common folks. After he regained his advantage, without a moment of hesitation, he immediately flew backwards. Only a few jumps, his grey figure had already disappeared into the vast wilderness outside the morgue. The silver light slowly receded, there were faint blood stains on the ground, but Xiaobai was gone. In the air, that mysterious fox cry was still lingering. After a very long time it quietly disappeared. On the contrary, as if appearing from thin air, Xiaobai's slender figure again appeared in the air, slowly descended. She looked down, saw the blood stains on the ground, her white teeth biting her lips, her face greatly incensed. With a moment of caught off guard, she didn't expect Shang Guanxi, in order to live, was willing to put himself in a wretched state. Thought of such a tactic, she instead suffered his sneak attack and almost lost her life. But fortunately she was not common folks, she was the 9-tailed celestial fox. With 9 tails. Something not foreseeable. The night breeze was cold, blew from afar, brushing past, it was really a little chilly. Xiaobai stood in the courtyard, focused herself, and then, slowly turned around, looked at that dark house. She slowly walked in. In the morgue, it was still silent and dark, as if that heart-stopping battle had never happened. She stood at the entrance, under the faint starlight, her figure looked like it gradually started to float, appearing somehow strange. But even though Xiaobai would not be afraid like normal people, she was after all these demon ghosts' old ancestor, to say playing the devil. If there really was a real ghost, most likely might not win against her, don't even know who would be the one running away. Right now, Xiaobai's clear bright eyes swept past this dark house, glanced through the few coffins more carefully, bemused expression flashed past her face. But until the end, her attention was still on that coffin which stood in a secluded corner. "Come back, I know you are inside." Xiaobai did not walk over, only stood there, indifferently said. Nobody replied, there was only silence. The shaman demon who was hiding inside but could not move, not knowing what emotions he was going through, the plan which he thought he could deceive the world, hid into a coffin, did not expect to be first discovered by Shang Guanxi and then Xiaobai. Even within the coffin, there was still a living person who came in first, and he actually did not detected that. Guessed that emotion must be utterly lousy. Xiaobai frowned slightly, stepped forward but then stopped, glanced again at the surrounding, the bemused expression in her eyes deepened, as if deep inside this darkness, there was something, made her somehow fearful, hesitated. She was silent for a moment, again said, I know your identity, that day in the subdued devil cave, I guessed you have also seen me. Since it is so, we have no feuds between us, I only have one matter, would like to seek your advice. Her voice lightly reverberated in this house, the yin wind outside was still suo blowing, the big hole on the wall that Shang Guanxi crashed out, let in much of the chilly wind. After a long time, the shaman demon's voice was heard from that coffin, that's right, I remember you, what is it that you want to ask me? Xiaobai's brows raised, stared at that coffin, said, don't tell me you can't come out and talk. The shaman demon stifled, then slowly said, I just like it like this, if you have words quickly say it. Xiaobai snorted, said, all right, then I shall not waste time, I came to ask you, what ignites the heaven fire? The shaman demon clearly was shocked, his deep voice said, why do you ask this for? Xiaobai indifferently said, that day your master promised me, in the end he died without fulfilling, I after much difficulty came to know there is actually you, the fish that escaped the net, and so came to find out more. The shaman demon snorted, he is not my master, only shaman lady is. Xiaobai retorted, then those things that you have been doing for these years, what were those? The shaman demon was silent, said, what I did, were not for the world to understand. Xiaobai somehow impatient, said, forget it, those logics of yours, I don't bother to understand, and can't be bothered to, I only want to know my stuff, are you willing to say or not? The shaman demon again another silence, after a long time, said, the southern border 5 tribes are the shaman tribe descendants, this you should know right. Xiaobai frowned, said, so. The shaman demon indifferently said, the shaman tribe secret, would naturally be inherited by shaman tribe descendants. My words are until here, don't ask any more. Xiaobai repeated the shaman demon's words a few times in her heart, but her face did not change, only humphed, said, playing the devil. After speaking, as if made up her mind, she walked to that coffin, the house was not very big, a few coffins lay disorderly, with a few steps, she would come to one, and 2 more steps would be where the shaman demon lay. In the darkness, as if something, awaiting, staring at Xiaobai's figure. Xiaobai was expressionless, looked like about to continue ahead but when her feet stritted, her body suddenly turned, from the initial relaxed step suddenly to a rabbit bolting, right hand suddenly stretched out, slender 5 fingers, caught hold of that huge coffin beside her. Rumble. A loud sound, the huge coffin, the size almost 2 times of Xiaobai, held up just using Xiaobai's 5 fingers. And what was next was even more confounding, Xiaobai immediately floated out, and the coffin together with her. The huge coffin in the air made deep sounds, woo-woo quietly reverberated, the huge shadow enveloped Xiaobai's slender body, looking really strange. Even the shaman demon inside, was dumbfounded by Xiaobai's action. And the darkness in the house, seemed to be disturbed by Xiaobai's action, in the intense air movement, sinister seat sounds were heard. Xiaobai landed in the courtyard, without hesitation, concentrated fully, faint white light at her fingers, her right arm urgently waved, the huge coffin like being pulled by a great force, hit against the stone on the ground. Rumble. The deafening sounds instantly seemed to be near, the suffocating heavy dust immediately flew up, the entire huge coffin was broken into pieces, splinters and broken pieces sprayed everywhere. Xiaobai was already hiding aside, she of course did not care about the splinters but those dirty dust was something she could not tolerate. And past the heavy dust, suddenly, intense coughing was heard, a figure stumbled out, clothes in tatters, full of dust, extremely sorry. In the house, the shaman demon felt his hair stood, in the coffin beside the house, there was actually a person hiding, for a moment the shaman demon felt that his surroundings was really eerie, like anywhere was also suspicious. And unintentionally looking down, he saw that fat guy with him, had mockery in his eyes, at the same time also some degrees of reassurance. In the courtyard, the dust slowly settled, the person which had stumbled out crawled to a side, breathing in the fresh air with huge mouthfuls. Xiaobai stretched out her hand, irritably waved and beat a few times in front, pushing out some of the dust, slowly walked to that person. That person turned around, gave a dry laugh. Xiaobai looked at him carefully, suddenly was stunned, exclaimed, "Why is it you?" That person laughed bitterly, looking rather embarrassed, wiped the dirt off on the face, laughed dryly and said, "Naturally it will be me, the great deity." This person appearing before the nine-tailed celestial fox Xiaobai, unexpectedly was the one who called himself, Immortal Guide, Iron-Mouthed Deity, Zhou Yixian. Chapter 224 Convergence. Zhou Yixian right now looked from top to toe to be covered with a layer of dust, seemed like he had been in the coffin for a period of time, his faint immortal demeanor, right now did not exist. Xiaobai assessed him from top to bottom, naturally would not think nonsensical question like Zhou Yixian wanted to go into the coffin himself, directly said, "Why are you in the coffin?" Zhou Yixian laughed bitterly, said, "Of course caught by someone and thrown in." Xiaobai's eyes looked around the small black house, said, "Then the other two coffins beside you, do you know who are the people inside?" Zhou Yixian nodded, said, "The left is my granddaughter Xiao Huan, the right is Wild Dog Taoist." Xiaobai humphed, glanced at Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian feeling embarrassed but right now he couldn't care more about his pride, quickly beseeched Xiaobai, "This great deity, this, please have mercy, since you have saved me, might as well also save them both." Xiaobai shrugged, walked 2 steps towards the house, suddenly frowned, as if recalling something, turned and looked at Zhou Yixian with some strange expression. Zhou Yixian felt uncomfortable with her glance, laughed dryly, said, You what are you looking at me for?" Xiaobai stared at him, said, "What did you just call me?" Zhou Yixian a sound, stepped back, his face revealing regret. Xiaobai again looked at him from top to bottom, indifferently said, "I have indeed underestimated you, you actually can tell my identity." Zhou Yixian with a bitter face, cupped his hands together and said, "Miss, you see this, old man me did not have any other intention, only a slip of my mouth I said something I should not, miss please forgive, miss please forgive." Xiaobai in this short while, secretly observed Zhou Yixian, discovered that this old man had frivolous steps, weak stamina, really not a highly skilled cultivated martial artist, just that for some reason, he had exceptional keen eyesight, sharper than many well-known martial artists. Xiaobai had a change of heart. Zhou Yixian instead was anxious, having no choice he could only made a smiling face and asked Xiaobai, "Miss have a kind heart, better save the people first." Xiaobai coldly snorted, glanced at Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian was as silent as a cicada, quietly stepped back, wanted to say more but saw Xiaobai suddenly moved, already drifting into the dark small house. The next moment, loud sounds were heard unceasingly, strange woo-woo sounds were heard. Then Zhou Yixian suddenly saw darkness before his eyes, "Ayah!" cried out and ran. He had just ran. The 2 coffins which were on the ground just now, were thrown out by Xiaobai, pong pong 2 loud sounds, smashed onto the ground. The next moment, dust flew up again in the yard, debris flew everywhere, comparable to the scene just now. In the dust, a man and a woman coughing could be heard. Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist's figures, staggered out from the clouds of dust. Zhou Yixian was delighted, quickly went up, pulled both of them far away, asked many questions. Xiaobai had already walked out, stood apart, watched the 3 of them happily reuniting. But her face was clearly still solemn, kept glancing into the house. By now, the dust had settled, Xiaobai not moving and Zhou Yixian and the rest after escaping, initially were delighted but right now for some reason, seemed to be arguing, specifically to say should be Zhou Yixian saying something but Xiaohuan firmly objected. As for Wild Dog Taoist as usual, only watched them, did not speak out his opinion. Xiaobai watched them for some time, saw that they were still unable to resolve, couldn't help but feel curious, quietly walked over. Zhou Yixian was seen frowning, snapped and said, "All right, don't say any more, we will leave this goddamn place now, if not until the big devil comes back, we will really be dead without burial ground." Xiaohuan coldly laughed, said, "Then what about that person inside?" Zhou Yixian was stunned, looked like he couldn't help but feel ashamed, just that he refused to admit defeat, forced on and said, "You this child, what do you know? Firstly, that person was casted with Zhu Shinlock spell. Secondly, there are other restraining spells on the coffin, we can't save him too, so why don't we first go? If not, if we miss the opportunity, that devil comes back, won't we die in vain?" Xiaohuan angrily said, "Grandpa, you are talking nonsense again, that day the person obviously was caught because of us, how can we be so ungrateful?" Zhou Yixian shook his head greatly, wrong, it was true that day he was caught, but it is nonsense that he was caught because of us. Based on my judgment, that devil's skills are so high, we obviously are incomparable, but the person who helped us is also definitely not his match. Xiaohuan's mouth corners turned up high, hatefully said, "Anyway, we cannot just abandon him." Zhou Yixian frowning tightly, with a bitter face wanted to try and persuade his stubborn granddaughter again, Suddenly Xiao Bai's voice was heard, "The person that you all are saying, and that devil, what kind of person is he exactly?" Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were shocked, then both shook their heads. Xiao Bai glanced at Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian instead looked away. "The three of us are ordinary folks, how would we know about these people? We are terrified to death, won't know." Xiao Bai frowned, about to say that she did not doubt that this lady and that strange-looking dog-like person did not know, but Zhou Yixian, this old man, was extremely peculiar, made one had second thoughts, most likely there was something strange. However, Zhou Yixian insisted he knew nothing. Xiao Bai, although suspicious but could not do anything. She could only try, asked Xiao Huan, "Miss, do you remember what magical weapons were the person who helped you and that devil using?" Xiao Huan, when she first saw Xiao Bai, was moved. She was also considered a beauty, but facing Xiao Bai, that unparalleled, captivating the world beauty, especially looking delicate but somehow had an unspoken charm faintly around her eyes, this kind of mature graceful bearing was something Xiao Huan could never compare to. She already liked her 30%, furthermore Xiao Bai was their benefactor who saved them, felt even more intimate, now with Xiao Bai smiling and asking a question, only felt that this lady's eyes were as gentle as water. Although she herself was a woman, she couldn't help her heart pounding, even her words were stammered. What? Zhou Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist felt surprised, looked at Xiao Huan. Xiao Bai smiled and asked again. Xiao Huan calmed herself down, reprimanded herself in her heart, then looked down and said, "This I know, the person who helped us, his skills are very good. He used a celestial sword weapon, about 3 kai long, the color is bright yellow. When he wielded it, it was really powerful, like a red fire." Red fire. Suddenly, a cry, mixed with surprise and agitation, was heard from the entrance. The four of them were shocked, turned and looked, saw a white-attired lady, beautiful and elegant, holding a faint blue celestial sword, the glow rotating. One look and knew it was an exquisite weapon. And this lady's beauty was comparable to Xiao Bai, also exceedingly beautiful. If it was not Qingyun Hill Small Bamboo Valley Lu Shueqi, who would it be? Qingyun Hill, the ruins of Grass Temple Village. Under the ruins, in the wild vegetations, insect cries were heard unceasingly, in this deserted place, adding a few degrees of desolation. The night was deepening, black clouds hung low over the horizon, only a few stars shone weakly, managed to poke out and revealed some light. At some corner of the village, a wall where most parts of it had already collapsed, Ghostly quietly sat on the ground with his back leaning against it. Beside him, Xiao Wei lay on the ground, with Ghostly's thigh as his pillow, 4 limbs sprayed out, sleeping and snoring loudly. Ghostly did not sleep, his eyes were still opened, quietly watched every grass and tree in the surroundings, every inch of the ground, every part of the ruins. This was his hometown, the place where he spent the first part of his life. Just that as time passed, these eventually turned into memories, leaving only ruins, making one sigh. But, what was the purposeful of living? Ghostly watched the surroundings, then slowly lifted his head and looked at the firmament. The night sky hung low, above the horizon, not knowing if there really exist deities and celestials, devil and Buddha, who would listen to the mortals' heartfelt wishes. Xiao Hui's mouth twitched, made poo-poo sounds, flipped around, knocked its head against Ghostly's thigh a few times, again continued to sleep. Maybe, it had dreamt of its favorite wild fruits. Ghostly looked away and onto Xiao Wei, stretched out and gently smoothed its head fur. The monkey's fur was gentle and warm. A smile revealed on his lips, warm and innocent, like that young man many years ago, in this once village, loudly shouting, running with his might. The night soughing, someone seemed to be whispering, the grasses and trees swayed with the wind carried the grass's fragrance. He closed his eyes, staying quiet like this, peaceful night. Suddenly, the monkey woke up, 3 eyes abruptly opened, its head also lifted slightly up from Ghostly's leg, as if listening to something. At the same time, Ghostly frowned, the faint smile on his lips, quietly disappeared. He quietly, again opened his eyes, reflecting in it, was again this world. He stretched out his hand, gently patted Xiao Hui's head. Xiao Wei immediately became calm, turned and looked. He did not go back to sleep, crawled up, scratched its head and then leapt up to Ghostly's shoulder, kept peering around. Ghostly was still sitting at the corner. Before him, a broken wall happened to block his body, and through the crack on the wall, it just nice for him to look out. In such a desolate place, not even someone would come in the day. On this dark windy night, would there still be any surprising event happening? A strange smell, as if appearing out of thin air, suddenly descended on this abandoned place. Ghostly sensed something, frowned even deeper. The wind turned cold, as if the yin wind from the rumored 9 netherworlds, cold and penetrating, just that the cold was not only skin-deep, it had a feeling of penetrating into the heart. In this strange cold wind, a dark figure came down from the sky, quietly into this village ruins. In the distance, through that gap, Ghostly watched that figure quietly, but his shock was quite great. This unknown person, the evil power that he had was something he had not seen. Even with this distance, when that black figure landed, he could feel a slight churning of his entire body's channels. But, such a master, why would he come to this deserted place in the middle of the night? Ghostly pondered but could not think of why, could only watch this person. Soon, he noticed something strange. The dark color of this figure was not that the person was wearing black, it was instead his entire body was enveloped by a strange black energy, constantly turbulent and concealing his face. Ghostly felt even more bemused, watched this person even more carefully. But this person after landing, did not move, stood there strangely and did not move for a long time. Just when Ghostly was feeling bewildered, the dark figure suddenly moved, then slowly walked forward. Ghostly frowned tightly, coldly watched that figure. The figure stepped onto the grass, slowly over parts and parts of broken ruins. Ghostly's eyes also moved with him. The dark figure did not seem to have any special purpose, looking like he was only strolling. Ghostly, growing up in the village, naturally knew the surroundings well, but he could not tell where was this person heading to. The person seemed to be looking for something. After a while, the person seemed to discover something, stopped. Ghostly was surprised and looked at the direction where the person was looking, and suddenly his heart tightened. The place where the person was looking at was that broken temple. The person slowly walked near the temple but did not enter, instead stood outside. Ghostly, from his secluded corner, saw that person assessing the temple, suddenly lifted his hand and a sharp whistle was heard. The next moment, something dark was split out from the dark energy surrounding him, turning into a dark sharp arrow in the air, shot out, charging towards a pillar in the village. Ghostly's hands tightened, controlled himself and continued to watch. The dark arrow looked powerful. The next moment, it had already struck the stone pillar. A rumble was heard and the pillar, which was already in ruins, exploded. Debris flew, but what was strange was, when the pillar exploded, the place where the pillar was, 5 faint lights, carrying yin energy rose. They were a few spirits. In that moment, yin energy increased greatly around the temple. Ghost whales stared. Ghostly, who was concealed, immediately understood, and then anger revealed on his face. The tragic case of Grass Temple Village, more than 200 innocent lives were lost, so many people died tragically, their grievances were naturally deep. But this place was after all under Qing Yun Hill, and Qing Yun Hill had already sent someone down to perform rites for the unwilling spirits to return to reincarnation, considered it as making up to the Grass Temple Village. Just that for some reason, until today, in this broken temple, there were still so many spirits lingering. It was no wonder that although the place was abandoned for many years, wild grasses growing everywhere and yet none grown near the temple. Ghostly was thinking to himself but saw that the dark figure seemed oblivious to these fierce spirits that common folks would fear and avoid. On the contrary, he stretched out his hand and simply summoned. Those spirits seemed to know the power and tried to escape, but like an invisible force, they were all pulled to this mysterious figure. The next moment, in the sounds of desperate ghost wailings, these spirits were slowly merged into the black energy shrouding the figure. For some reason, Ghostly watched all these. His heart felt like it was on fire, his entire blood was churning, an inexplicable fury immediately burst up. This was his hometown, that temple was his playground during his youth. The next moment, he had already charged out. The dark figure immediately sensed something behind, swiftly turned around. When he saw the man and the monkey, this mysterious person seemed stunned. Then, behind the layers of dark energy, a strange sound that seemed like his laughter. The voice was deep and hoarse, totally unclear. Ghostly coldly said, "Who are you? Why are you here, collecting the spirits? This is an atrocious act against heaven. Aren't you afraid of judgment?" A stir in the black energy, suddenly his entire body flipped, rose up to the air. Ghostly was surprised, knew that this person was strange, but his skills was not to be underestimated, quickly focused and prepared. Unexpectedly that was a fake move, made a feint and escaped. Ghostly coldly snorted, without hesitation, also leapt up and pursued. Ghostly in the air saw the direction the person fled to, seemed to be heading towards south of Heyong City where the wilderness lay, and so kept pursuing. He wanted to see, who exactly was this strange figure. As for what waited for him ahead, he never thought of it. But who would seriously thought about it, and, even if you did, would it come to use? Maybe, this was like the future, no matter what, whether good or bad, eventually we still have to face it. Chapter 225 Rescuing. In the abandoned house, following Lu Shuiqi's sudden appearance, the atmosphere became somehow strange. Zhou Yixian frowned, forced a laugh and said, "Isn't this Qing Yunhil's Lu heroine? Why are you here at this kind of place too?" Lu Shuiqi gave a sideways glance at Zhou Yixian, following which her eyes landed on Xiaobai. Xiaobai smiled, her beautiful eyes were also looking at her. Lu Shuiqi's brows frowned and then spoke, towards Xiao Huan, "Miss Xiao Huan, the magical weapon you have just mentioned, was it really what the person who saved you was using?" Xiao Huan affirmatively nodded, said, "That's right, it was as described as so, I remembered clearly." Lu Shuiqi had conflicting expressions in her face, looked as if she was contemplating something, but she did not pause for long and continued to ask, "Then where is that person now? And, you have just said the other, devil, where is he? What is his identity, do you know?" Xiaobai, who was standing beside, began to look attentive. Xiao Huan did not think much, spoke directly, "That devil's identity and origin I couldn't tell. I only know that he is really highly skilled, but after he caught us, he locked us in these dirty coffins and then disappeared. He usually returns after 3 to 5 days. I remembered he came once yesterday and then I didn't see him again, most likely he would be back only after a few more days." Lu Shuiqi with a "oh" sound, frowning even more deeply, said, "How about the person who saved you?" Xiao Huan pointed to the back, said, "Isn't he inside the coffin at the corner of the house?" Lu Shuiqi was stunned. Xiaobai also turned slightly pale. With her skills, she did not detect that there was actually someone inside the coffin. Lu Shuiqi nodded, hesitating for a moment, walked over to that dark abandoned house. Xiao Huan looked at her, couldn't help but shouted, "Be careful." Lu Shuiqi paused, turned back and glanced at Xiao Huan, smiled and nodded. Then, she focused herself and stepped onto the mosses-covered stone stairs. The stairs only had at most 3 or 5 steps, in a few steps she had crossed over them. The small house was dark as usual, could only make out the outlines of the objects in them. But other than the faint starlight coming in from the entrance, on the rooftop of this dilapidated house, there was a huge hole which had just been made, and so, it was much brighter as compared to when Xiaobai entered. Lu Shuiqi soon found the coffin lying at the corner of the house. The area was also the darkest spot in the house. Far away from light, indistinctly could feel that it was also where the yin energy was the strongest. This was also when the shaman demon entered the house, his first reaction to walk over here. Lu Shuiqi inhaled deeply. With her current skills, her own Qing Yun's skills was naturally to the point of perfection, and with her intelligent decisive aptitude, in that West Big Marsh, the 3rd volume of Tian Shu which she had remembered together with Ghost Li, in her private training, it had already aided her tremendously. Just that she was usually careful and not many could tell her real level of skills. And right now standing in this small house, Lu Shuiqi subconsciously frowned. The strong yin energy was out of her expectation, and yet just a few steps away outside the house, she could not detect it at all. Clearly, this was a boundary set by some master, bounding all of these strong yin energy within this circumference. Just with this level of skill, it was already impressive. And in this place with such strong yin energy, it was definitely not caused by this ordinary morgue, and laying such a strange spell here to incarcerate these people. Who would it be? Could it really be as what she had guessed? She discovered that cold sweat covered her palms, but she was not an ordinary folk. Her mind determined, although she was shocked but she did not fear, activated her power and prepared, step by step walked over. In the coffin, both the shaman demon and the fat person were watching Lu Shuiqi approaching. The fat person did not have any reaction and only watched. The shaman demon instead was panicking, did not know what Lu Shuiqi would do. He wanted to escape this awkward place, but alas, in this short period of time, no matter what plans he came out with, how many cunning tactics he tried, the strange seal implanted in this coffin, as if like his nemesis, bounded his body tightly, he couldn't even summon any strength. The shaman demon complained incessantly in his heart. Without any solutions, he could only lament it in his heart and blamed himself for being unlucky. Lu Shuiqi slowly approached the coffin which looked plain and normal, and its material was made using middle-grade wood. Most part of it was rotting. Naturally it would not be the coffin itself emitting such strong yin energy. With her sharp senses, she discovered there were 2 people inside the coffin, but surrounding them was an indistinct dark gloomy screen, wrapping them in it. And this yin energy, although she was 3 kai far, she could feel her energy channels surging faintly, cold icy feeling, constantly invading. Just what kind of evil spell it was, or what kind of unknown evil weapon, could have such inconceivable power? Lu Shuiqi forced herself to control her shock, at the same time focused and suppressed the disturbance felt in her channels, carefully assessed the coffin and slowly stretched her hand over. Outside the house, Xiao Bai's figure flashed. She leaned against the door frame, her expression relaxed but her graceful eyes was constantly on Lu Shuiqi. With her skills, earlier when she rescued Zhou Yixian and the rest, she already discovered the strange coffin in the house. The spells used to incarcerate Zhou Yixian and the rest were only ordinary spells, but that coffin in the corner was dangerous. Even she did not dare to act hasty, made a decision at that moment to first save Zhou Yixian and the rest. Right now, looking at Lu Shuiqi standing before the coffin, Xiao Bai naturally watched carefully, and a shaman demon was still trapped inside the coffin. It was just the person she wanted and so paid full attention. And on the other end, Zhou Yixian and the rest could not help their curiosity, quietly moved to where that big hole was, peeped into the house. Inside and outside the morgue, a silence descended, the atmosphere turned somehow strange, everyone was as silent as cicada, all watching Lu Shuiqi. As for in the far distance horizon, a dark vortex that charged up into the sky, and a figure that seemed to be pursuing it, yet nobody noticed. In the darkness, following that white figure moving slightly, Lu Shuiqi's slender fair hand slowly touched the coffin, and almost at the same time, this action which should be silent, a clear crisp sound was heard from within the coffin. Like some twigs breaking. Lu Shuiqi's expression changed, her hand was swiftly withdrawn and at the same time, a dark energy emerged out from where her hand was. Seat sounds were heard unceasingly. It was the same spot, like a ghost fire but without flames. The coffin had a burn palm mark which had the same size as Lu Shuiqi. The shaman demon in the coffin had a chill. The skills he was practicing had some similarities with this confining spell, although his power could not be compared, but when he saw the colorless black fire instantly ignited and extinguished, he couldn't help but was shocked. The consequences of being burned by that black fire, he could imagine it more or less, but he could not fathom, why did this vicious restriction not attack him and yet at Lu Shuiqi? He thought hard, and when he couldn't figure out, suddenly he sensed something. Looking down, he saw on that fat person, with this restriction being triggered, had a strange change. A thick yin energy gushed out, 100 times stronger than the indistinct energy just now, immediately filled up the coffin they were in, and the shaman demon felt a loud ringing sound in his head, as if instantly everything became empty. Innumerable cold vicious energies like poisonous snakes wormed into his body, hatefully bit his entire body energy channels, extremely painful, and yet he was unable to cry out. In that short moment of time, he felt almost like in hell. And the source of this yin energy was actually coming out from that fat person. Lu Shuiqi watched the black palm mark, her face slightly pale. Xiao Bai, who was standing far behind her, also stood up straight, a solemn look on her face. And the next moment, Lu Shuiqi seemed to sense something, her body shook, her expression changed greatly, but she did not retreat or avoid. Without any hesitation, her palm overturned. Kang Lang, a sound like dragons singing, faint light glowed, pale blue light shot out in all directions, immediately lit up this small house. Tianya out of the sheath. Propitious vapors rose, the long sword like autumn waters reflecting Lu Shuiqi's frost-like face, the sword light like water, in the mid-air like ripples in a pond, pausing slightly, unceasingly creating illusions of the sword in the air, struck down onto that coffin. To say it was struck, but yet it did not have the power of breaking the mountain. As the sword came near, this coffin seemed to have something that sensed it was in danger. Faint crackling sounds started. A dark energy abruptly rose up from the coffin, like having a form. It stopped the sword. Lu Shuiqi's countenance changed. With a loud shout, she suddenly leapt up, her white clothes fluttering, like a fairy. At where she was standing just now, 3 Kai radius, seat sounds suddenly erupted. That circle was burnt beyond recognition by an unknown dark energy. A burnt smell permeated in the small house. Lu Shuiqi in the mid-air did not panic. Tianya's sword dazzled with blue light, swept a small circle in the air and stabbed down. The coffin's surroundings was all dark yin energy, rolling like clouds. Nobody knew where did all these clouds came from, and all in a sudden, from above blue light like electricity, stabbing down, and below the dark energy, as if being manipulated by someone, gathered into the center and like a black wall, blocked in front of the sword. As the sword and dark energy was about to collide, Tianya's sword tip had just touched the dark energy, like a metal spring. Lu Shuiqi's body like a feather, drifted back up. And when her body floated up, her left hand finger as if like a knife, a faint golden light flashed once, but a dark green light shot out from her palm. It was the ultimate pure Qingyun sect Taiji Zan Qingwei, on the side where the dark energy was thin, stabbed in. Pong! The dark energy immediately was in turbulence and made a few deep groans, as if something had cracked. Xiaobai, who was standing at the entrance, smiled slightly and nodded. On the other side, Zhou Yixian, who was standing behind Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, suddenly frowned, as if he had saw something suspicious, shock revealed in his eyes, and then he looked to be contemplating. Lu Xueqi unexpectedly succeeded in her sneak attack. The dark energy also seemed to be surprised and angry, immediately turned to defend, suppressing darkness, like a layer of dark clouds charged towards that white figure in the air. Lu Xueqi's figure paused, swift wind assaulting the face. Her hair dancing with it, without any moment of hesitation, but the figure seemed to be held up by an invisible huge force, immediately flew upwards, a deafening sound, a scene which did not seem to match her figure. The entire house rooftop exploded, wood debris and broken bits rained down, dust and dirt like rain, only that white figure, like a faint cloud, charged up to the sky, in the faint starlight horizon, looking even more celestial and at ease. The dark energy managed to pursue about 1 zhang high, looked like it was out of strength. The night breeze across the vast flatlands blew past, not a moment later, dispersed this dark energy. Lu Xueqi paused slightly in the high air, a clear whistle, again charged down towards the house. Right now Xiaobai had already leapt out from that entrance, clasping her hands behind and stood at a distance. Zhou Yixian and the rest were in a sorry state, hurrying to avoid the broken wood and debris raining from the sky. And in this chaos, Lu Xueqi had once again entered the house. In her clear shout, the blue light in the house burst forth, shot out various beams. The next moment, a loud rumble within the house, mixed with Lu Xueqi's delighted cry. "Tian teacher uncle, it is really you." Zhou Yixian and the rest stood far away, after ensuring that they would not be again hit by falling debris, then turned and looked. The house by now had already began to quiet down, and soon, the dazzling blue light also disappeared, following which, from the entrance, someone walked out. This person was not Lu Xueqi, it was a mysterious person dressed in all black, even his face was concealed. Zhou Yixian and the rest did not recognize this person. Xiaobai instead snorted, moving without movements. Her figure suddenly appeared before the shaman demon, blocked his escape route. The shaman demon saw Xiaobai, made a bitter laugh and stopped. The next moment, footsteps sounded from the house. This time, standing at the entrance, were two people. It was Lu Xueqi assisting a fat man who appeared wan and sallow, slowly walked out. Xiao Huan and the rest saw it clearly. This fat man was the person who saved them from the devil person, just that in this hurried glance, confined in the coffin for several days, for some reason, this fat man looked like he had gained more weight. Lu Xueqi supported this fat man to sit on the stone steps, quietly asked, "Tian teacher uncle, are you all right?" Everyone heard her and was surprised. Lu Xueqi's status, all of them obviously knew, and hearing her addressing this fat man like this, could it be that this person was also a Qingyun sect member and looked like one of the elder generations? This fat man was naturally Big Bamboo Valley leader who mysteriously disappeared with Qingyun sect head Reverend Dao Zan several days ago, Tian Buyi. Tian Buyi glanced at Lu Xueqi, nodded but did not speak. Lu Xueqi, being intelligent, understood and did not say anything more. However, her heart was pounding. The initial nervous feeling seemed to be even stronger now. Tian Buyi being here, then, the person who was even more important, where was he now? Could it be he was the devil person mentioned by Xiao Huan? Lu Xueqi's head had this thought. For some reason, her back felt as if there was a weak piercing pain. The shaman demon stood aside. His eyes looked at Tian Buyi intently. This was the first time he was looking clearly at his face, but when he was watching Tian Buyi, a strange expression flashed past his eyes. However, he did not have the time to observe others. The next moment, Xiaobai's voice was already speaking to him. "Where is the thing I want?" The shaman demon's heart jumped once and again laughed bitterly, turned and spoke to Xiaobai. "I have already told you before." Xiaobai paid a sound, said, "The southern border is thousands of miles away. Don't tell me because of this one statement of yours that someone knows and I have to run over. I am advising you, better honestly hand over the thing I want." The shaman demon was silent for a moment, the mask covering his face. The rest couldn't see his expression but could tell he was contemplating something. Xiaobai, feeling impatient, said, "What kind of a person I am, you know it too. I am different from that Fenshang Valley old ghost. That day when your master was around, also agreed to give it to me, right?" The shaman demon quietly nodded. Xiaobai's words seemed to persuade him. He slowly walked to her, whispered. Xiaobai suddenly frowned, said, "Really?" The shaman demon indifferently said, "You have encountered shaman spells more than once, the taboos and abstinence in southern border shaman tribe, you also know it more or less." Xiao Bai was silent for a moment, nodded and said, "All right, I believe you this time. If you dare to lie to me, sooner or later I will find you, and make you pay." The shaman demon with a bitter laugh, shook his head. Xiao Bai again turned and looked at the others, finally on Lu Xueqi. Lu Xueqi was also looking at her. Xiao Bai smiled, her eyes and lips, carried indescribable captivation, yet without any coquettish feeling, instead it enhanced her beauty, said, "Miss Lu, it has been a long time." Lu Xueqi, expressionless, looked at Xiao Bai and only faintly nodded. Xiao Bai's smile deepened, said, "I wonder if you have seen him recently." Lu Xueqi frowned and instead humphed, her expression turned cold. Xiao Bai saw and suddenly covered her mouth and laughed, following which she shook her head and turned, strided off, soon disappeared from the people's sight. Chapter 226 Intention. Sounds of coughing were heard from beside. It was not very loud but it sounded pressing. Lu Xueqi and the rest looked towards the direction and saw it was Tian Bui who was sitting on the stone steps, coughing incessantly with pain revealed on his face. Lu Xueqi frowned slightly, worry revealed in her eyes. With Tian Bui's cultivation, he had already reached a level where illnesses would not touch him, not even this slight coughing. Evidently Tian Bui's body was hurt somewhere. Lu Xueqi was silent. Xiao Huan, who was standing at the side, quietly walked over. Tian Bui was surprised, looked at Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan smiled and said, "This, senior, thank you for saving us three." Tian Bui smiled, spoke in his tiredness, "It's just a small matter, don't have to mention it, but this is not a good place and not for you to stay here for long. If there isn't any other matters, better leave here fast." Zhou Yixian nodded in succession, said, "Yes, yes, he is very right, Xiao Huan, we better hurry leave." Xiao Huan rolled her eyes at her grandfather, said to Tian Bui, "Senior, are you feeling all right? Is there anything I can help you with?" Tian Bui shook his head, said, "I am fine, you all can leave. If that person comes back, you all might not be that lucky again to escape." After speaking, a dark color indistinctly flashed past his plump face. His face again revealed pain and started to cough again, his voice also turned rougher. The shaman demon, who was standing alone by himself, his eyes kept staring at Tian Bui, watched all of his actions. On his face, which was veiled, only a pair of eyes revealed a thoughtful look. Xiao Huan could not resist Zhou Yixian's urging. At the same time, after confirming that there was nothing she could help with, she bided her farewell to Tian Bui with a nod and then followed Zhou Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist out. However, only after a few steps, she could not help but glanced at the shaman demon. She seemed to discover something and was surprised, spoke to Zhou Yixian, "Grandpa, look at that person, why is he dressed the same as that teacher?" Zhou Yixian's first reaction was, "What teacher, and paused. He squinted and assessed the shaman demon, said, "The world is really full of weird people and things, can't say for sure there are a few that are similar to that teacher who is acting mysteriously. Don't bother about him, we better hurry up and leave." Xiao Huan acknowledged and followed, but she could not help and took another look. The shaman demon did not notice Zhou Yixian and them, stood there quietly and watched Tian Bui. Soon, Zhou Yixian, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist left the abandoned morgue. The place, which already appeared desolate, immediately became even more cold and cheerless. Tian Bui and Lu Xueqi's attention soon came to that mysterious black-attired man. Tian Bui indifferently said, "Does Mr. Still has matters here?" The shaman demon was silent for a moment, his eyes from Tian Bui to Lu Xueqi and finally back to Tian Bui. Then, he looked like he wanted to say something but eventually did not say a single word. His figure floated backwards, silently merged into the night darkness. The night breeze blew from afar, chilling. In the entire morgue, there was not sound, not even the usual insects' cries in the wilderness, a dead silence. Lu Xueqi, for some reason, felt a moment of uneasiness. Tian Bui looked up, watched for a long time, seemed to be pondering. Lu Xueqi did not know the reason for his deep thoughts and so did not dare to disrupt, but after a while, there was still no movement from Tian Bui. Worried about his health condition, was about to inquire when Tian Bui suddenly lowered his head, followed by a series of coughing that was even more intense than previous. Lu Xueqi was taken aback, was at a loss and could only ask, "Tian teacher uncle, are you all right?" Tian Bui coughed for a while before ceasing, finally caught his breath. He slowly waved his hand, gesturing that he was fine. Lu Xueqi could not help but say, "Tian teacher uncle, we are not far from Qingyun Hill. I think we better return to Qingyun first, let's make plans after meeting the various senior teachers." Tian Bui frowned, seemed to recall something, turned and said to Lu Xueqi, "This period when I am away, Big Bamboo Valley and your teacher Aunt Suru, are they all right?" Lu Xueqi nodded and said, all are fine, just that everyone did not know where did you disappear to and so are very anxious about it. Tian Buyi smiled, looked like one of his main concern was assured, but in that smile, there was a trace of bitterness. Lu Xueqi saw it, hesitated and probed carefully, Tian teacher uncle, just now those people were talking about you fighting with the evildoer, who is that person? Tian Buyi glanced at her, his brows tightened, did not speak. Lu Xueqi met his glance, suddenly discovered on this Tian teacher uncle's face, other than exhaustion, there was a trace of dark energy which was not supposed to be there. Could it be that strange evil spell which incarcerated him had damaged his energy channels? Lu Xueqi worried in her heart, but before her, there was another urgent matter which she could not ignore. She hesitated and finally quietly asked Tian Buyi, that person, is it sect head teacher Uncle Daozan? Tian Buyi was shocked, sharp glint suddenly shot out of his eyes, coldly said, what did you say? Lu Xueqi hurriedly spoke, disciple before leaving the mountain, was confided in by my mentor, the past event where she and Tian teacher uncle, Suru teacher aunt in the founder's ancestral hall. Tian Buyi was stunned but eventually he calmed down, after a long time, he heaved a long sigh and said, didn't expect Shui Yu would actually tell you. Lu Xueqi said, it is because sect head teacher Uncle Daozan and Tian teacher uncle both of you disappeared at the same time. Qing Yun sect was in a chaos and she was extremely worried teacher Uncle Daozan would be taken over by the demons in his heart. Xiao Yikai from the most senior branch yet was clearly unaware of this and so was forced to make a decision there and then, that she would take control of Qing Yun's affairs and instructed disciple to leave the mountain and search for both of you. Tian Buyi, silent for a moment, said, if you discovered Reverend Daozan at the foot of the mountain and if he really had turned into what your teacher feared, did Shui Yu tell you what you should do? Lu Xueqi turned slightly pale, it was as if this secret to her was an extremely huge responsibility. Under the stare of Tian Buyi, she inhaled deeply and resolutely said, before disciple left the mountain, had visited Tong Tian Peak founder's ancestral hall with mentor, before Qing Yun ancestral tablets, made a solemn vow, if things are really as so, for the sake of Qing Yun sect's thousands of years of reputation, disciple would go and fight till death, definitely would not have mercy and never reveal this matter for the rest of my life. Tian Buyi looked deeply at Lu Xueqi, at the end nodded and only sighed heavily, although I don't like Shui Yu but I have to say, she has really produced a good disciple. Lu Xueqi was expressionless, lowered her head and said, Tian teacher uncle you flattered me. Tian Buyi faintly said, in the second generation of Qing Yun sect disciples, there are more than 1,000 people, looking at a glance, how many could take on such heavy responsibility? He was silent for a moment and continued, your assumption is right, the person whom I had engaged in a fight a few days ago, is indeed your sect head teacher Uncle Daozan. Although Lu Xueqi was already expecting it but to hear it from Tian Buyi, she could not help but shook, after a long time, she quietly said, then sect head teacher uncle his body. Tian Buyi snorted, shook his head, sighed and said, his feet are already deeply immersed in mud, unable to free himself. Lu Xueqi was silent. Tian Buyi paused and continued, the events in between are a long story but since you already know the whole story, I don't have anything to conceal from you. That day I first discovered clues of Daozan's senior brother going astray, and so went up to Tong Tian Peak. In the end at the founder's ancestral hall, I discovered that he really, and then we had a fight in the hall, although he had turned over to the dark side but he was still highly skilled, eventually I was caught by him. Lu Xueqi was secretly alarmed, Tian Buyi and Reverend Daoshuan's skills, she was aware of their levels and also witnessed it before, these two Qing Yun sect high-caliber figures fighting inside the hall, the intensity of the battle one could imagine, although right now Tian Buyi seemed to be making it an understatement but it was not hard to imagine the actual scene. Tian Buyi made a bitter laugh and said, that day when I went over, I was also prepared, if I could bring Daozan's senior brother back, that would be the best, if I really had no choice, I could only put in my best effort to fight. When I and your teacher Shui Yu overheard this secret at the hall, one senior brother once said, when the person sinks into depravity, due to the evil penetrating the body, his vitality would be damaged and substantially decline. I of course know that Daozan's senior brother is higher skilled than me, what I thought was, the most in the unfortunate event, I would perish with him. After all, this matter must never be leaked out. Lu Xueqi could not help but feel revered, from the bottom of her heart said, Tian teacher uncle's intention, the sun and moon would be witnesses, our ancestors will definitely bless and protect you. Tian Buyi shook his head, said, who knows after I started to fight with Daozan's senior brother, I found out that although the evil took him, his skills was still as powerful. After a few fights, I was still captured. Just that for some reason, he did not have the intention to kill me, instead brought me down and incarcerated me in this sinister abandoned morgue. Lu Xueqi, reminded by his words, urgently asked, then Tian teacher uncle, are you hurt? You don't look well. Tian Bui was surprised, did not understand her meaning and then comprehended and with a self-ridicule tone, said, whoever being stuffed in that coffin, and for so many days, naturally would not look good. Lu Xueqi frowned, still felt uneasy but could not put a finger to it, could only remain silent. Tian Bui glanced at her, said, this matter more or less now you know it, what are your plans now? Lu Xueqi frowning tightly, said, would like to ask Tian teacher uncle, then, teacher uncle Daozan where is he now? Tian Bui shook his head said, after he descended into the evil, his actions and plans could not be predicted, most of the time he abandoned us, only returning after several days. Counting now he has just left this morgue yesterday, most likely he would only return after a few more days but nobody could be certain, sometimes he would also return the following day. Lu Xueqi paused and said, Tian teacher uncle, why don't we first return to the mountain, although this matter cannot be leaked to others but as long as with my mentor and Suru teacher aunt, the three of you senior teachers discussing it together, I guess there would definitely be a better plan. Tian Bui was silent for a moment but in the end shook his head, this isn't right. Firstly, Daozan's senior brother has already sunk deeply into evil, his mind and thoughts are completely different, what he will do, nobody can predict. Secondly, in the case that we return to the mountain and we lost trace of him, then what shall we do? He paused for a moment, said, why not like this, you first return to the mountain, inform Shuiyu and Suru teacher aunt about the events and ask them to quickly come. Lu Xueqi hesitated for a moment, said, but if teacher uncle Daozan returns tonight, then what shall we do? Tian Bui smiled faintly, did not answer immediately and instead stood up. His stature was short and fat, his features not that outstanding but for some reason, just standing so casually, it carried a certain presence, awe-inspiring and commanding respect. A lifetime of cultivation, what is the purpose? Tian Bui quietly said, being a man, how can we fear just before the battle? Lu Xueqi also stood up, all along to her, Tian Bui, other than being that person's mentor, was nothing more, but at this moment, she from the bottom of her heart, was full of respect for this teacher uncle. She clenched her teeth, loudly said, Tian teacher uncle, you have just been released and still need to meditate and heal, tonight I will protect you, tomorrow morning I will rush back to Qingyun and notify my mentor and Suru teacher aunt. If in the event teacher uncle Daozan really returns tonight. Tian Bui was surprised, hearing that, glanced at Lu Xueqi, said, then. She smiled, her face appearing even more beautiful in the night breeze, said, among Qingyun disciples, it is not only Tian teacher uncle Yu who is unafraid of death. Tian Bui looked at Lu Xueqi for a long time, clapped his hands and smiled, well said, what a statement of unafraid of death. Lu Xueqi smiled faintly and said, Tian teacher uncle, you better quickly sit down and mediate your breathings. Tian Bui did not speak more, only nodded, again sat on the stairs, closed his eyes. Lu Xueqi looked around, the night was chilly, yin wind soughing, not to say humans, even a ghost would be hard to find. The night was deep, who would know what tomorrow would bring? She did not wish to think, also sat down below Tian Bui, closed her eyes. Not knowing how long they sat, Lu Xueqi's mind gradually became clear, although she did not open her eyes but the energy channels in her body circulated smoothly, as if she could sense every grass and tree far around her, as if she was seeing them. She felt somehow assured. These few days, she was frequently moving around and was also heartsick but her cultivation seemed to have improved. Just that she also discovered, although her senses were alert, for some reason, Tian Bui who was sitting beside her, she could not even sense his heartbeat. Lu Xueqi immediately felt another sense of reverment, seemed like Qingyun elders, all had astonishing skills. While her thoughts were so, she suddenly heard Tian Bui's voice, Lu teacher niece. Lu Xueqi opened her eyes, quickly spoke, Tian teacher uncle, please call me Xueqi. Tian Bui looked at her, a faint glimmer in his eyes, seemed to carry a deep meaning, slowly nodded and said, Xueqi. Lu Xueqi smiled and said, yes Tian teacher uncle, what is the matter? Tian Bui shifted his gaze away, did not speak immediately. Lu Xueqi felt puzzled, Tian Bui's gaze seemed to be drifting, looking at some unknown spot, after a long time, suddenly said, in the past you with our branch that good-for-nothing Lao Chi disciple are acquainted. Lu Xueqi had a shock. For a moment she who had always been calm, suddenly felt at a loss, even under her fair face, had two spots of faint pink. Forcing her pounding heartbeats to calm down, Lu Xueqi controlled her feeling but her face still had some shyness and embarrassment, quietly said, yes, Tian teacher uncle, you why did you suddenly ask this? Tian Buyi was expressionless, couldn't tell if he was happy or angry, as if talking about something unimportant to him, indifferently said, I heard these past years, you have left the mountain and traveled around, quite acquainted with Lao Qi, and even because of him, was reprimanded by your teacher a few times, and even once, before everyone, before Dao Zan's senior brother and your teacher, rejected Fenshang Valley master who personally proposed marriage for his disciple. Lu Xueqi at this moment could not comprehend why Tian Buyi was asking all these but her face was hot, most like would be red, her heart was also in a panic, as if talking about this matter before an unfamiliar Tian Buyi, made her even more flustered than before her teacher Shui Yu master. Yes, Lu Xueqi for the first time, stammered, after a long while said, but the reason why I rejected the marriage proposal, was not entirely all because of him, it was because I myself did not like and so. Tian Buyi suddenly interrupted her, directly asked, so you like our Lao Qi? Lu Xueqi's head felt a winged sound, her face felt even hotter, she looked at Tian Buyi, saw his bright glare, watching her. Lu Xueqi suddenly felt an unknown courage, abruptly sat straight, breathed deeply, looked straight at Tian Buyi, loudly, clearly, cleanly said. Yes. This sound, like cutting through the ice, was clear and pleasing, without any moment of hesitation, like her clear eyes, without any doubt. Tian Buyi's mouth opened but was instead laughing loudly, his laughter was uninhibited, from melancholy to delight. Lu Xueqi saw him laughing, felt embarrassed instead but for some reason towards this short and plump teacher uncle, she felt a few degrees of closeness. Until Tian Buyi ceased his laughter and again looked at Lu Xueqi, she then smiled but felt an inexplicable sadness, quietly said, but pity he is now, the various teachers most likely would not accept him anymore, if he could return to Qingyun again, how good would that be? Tian Buyi strangely rolled his eyes, coldly said, what return? I have never said that I have kicked this worthless guy out. Lu Xueqi was stunned, could not understand his words, looked up at him. Tian Buyi indifferently said, I know, you are just worried about your teacher, right? Lu Xueqi lowered her head, said, teacher is also doing what is best for me, and she is not wrong, I am the person who is wrong, I understand. Tian Buyi suddenly this coarse behavior took Lu Xueqi by surprise. Tian Buyi glanced towards the distant Qingyun hill, said, I just feel, that teacher of yours is really becoming more and more like that Zhenyu grand teacher grandma. She could not figure it out herself and yet still want to stick her nose into everything, and actually especially like to control her disciples' thoughts. Could it be she is also like her teacher, has become old and muddle-headed? Lu Xueqi exclaimed, Tian teacher uncle, why are you saying such words? Tian Buyi glanced at Lu Xueqi, he laughed and then waved his hand said, don't worry, after all these, leave your matter to me. Lu Xueqi was stunned, said, what? Tian Buyi sneered, to speak of it, it's not only you still have a senior sister named Wenman, right? Lu Xueqi nodded, said, yes, Wenman's senior sister she actually is quite close to Big Bamboo Valley Song Darren. Speaking of this, she couldn't help but smile. Tian Buyi stared at her, angrily said, Song Darren is also another wooden fish head. Lu Xueqi burst out laughing, said, when our Wenman senior sister spoke to us privately about Song's senior brother, also said that. Tian Buyi shook his head, looked rather unpleased with that straightforward and good-natured eldest disciple, not knowing if it's because Song Darren had caused him to lose face, then said, don't worry, next time I will personally go up to Small Bamboo Valley and propose marriage to your teacher for our branches two worthless fellows. Lu Xueqi immediately turned red, it was something she had never thought before. In her flustered state, she said, Tian teacher uncle, if you continue to tease disciple, I will be angry. Tian Buyi looked at her, I mean it, when did I tease you? Unless you don't wish to marry out Lao Qi. Lu Xueqi panicked, said, no, not right, I don't mean that, I am. Tian Buyi's plump face, his eyes blinked, with a serious face asked, then what do you mean? Lu Xueqi for a moment was at a loss, not knowing if she was feeling embarrassed or panicking, her face turned pink. Tian Buyi smiled, said, all right, I would not say more, I see that you are an intelligent girl, what I meant, you should understand. Lu Xueqi breathed deeply, slowly calmed down. On her beautiful face, it still had faint blush, but her eyes was back to her usual clearness. The next moment, she slowly and resolutely nodded and said, "Yes, disciple, understood." Tian Buyi stared at her and pursued, "You are willing?" Lu Xueqi's blush deepened, but this time, she did not panic and answered, "Yes." Chapter 227 Reunite. Tian Buyi heaved a long sigh, revealing a smile on his face. Lu Xueqi after all was a thoughtful person, silent for a moment, looking at Tian Buyi, said, "Tian teacher uncle, what you meant just now, is saying he can return to Qingyun." Tian Buyi snorted, said, 10 years ago at Qingyun Hill the truth was revealed, Lao Qi walked out. After the incident I have thought about it over and over again, and I feel that Lao Qi has nothing to do with it. He did not do anything wrong at all, and in the end just like that a strange combination of factors, without rhyme or reason, was kicked out of Qingyun. In my whole life I have only taken in 7 disciples, although every one of them is good for nothing, but if you want me to just shrug it off, adultly take it as if I have never taken in this disciple, wash my hands off it, that is also absolutely impossible. Lu Xueqi, like someone being in the dark for a very long time and suddenly saw a weak ray of light at the end of the tunnel, right now was really surprised and happy. Tian Buyi continued, I also know that if I really do this, most likely there would be many obstacles, but over these 10 years I have always observed Lao Qi, it's considered at least his conscience is still there, and I have not heard about him doing any atrocities act against the heavens. Lu Xueqi hurriedly added, that's right, I have also observed, but after he has joined the evil sect, never heard about his evildoing. Speaking until the end, she discovered Tian Buyi was looking at her with a face that was smiling or not smiling. Her face turned red and her voice dropped. Tian Buyi nodded, said, you are also considered sincere, these 10 years, I guess you must not have it easy too. Lu Xueqi was silent. Tian Buyi coughed a few times, he seemed breathless and then said, anyway, as long as he still acknowledge me as his teacher, then his affairs, no, he glanced at Lu Xueqi, smiled and said, the both of your affairs, I will definitely would not do nothing. Lu Xueqi gently bit her lips, after a moment, looked down and quietly said, disciple thanks teacher uncle. Tian Buyi nodded but involuntarily burst out coughing, as if while the impromptu chats made him happy, but he also looked tired, and the indistinct dark look on his face seemed to have darkened. Lu Xueqi couldn't help but feel worried, said, Tian teacher uncle, you better don't speak too much now, better meditate first. Speaking, she looked up at the sky, said, looking at the sky, I think there is at least 4 hours before daybreak, and then I will hurry to Qingyun Hill and inform teacher and Suru teacher aunt. Tian Buyi nodded, again closed his eyes. Lu Xueqi breathed deeply, again calmed her erratic heart and also closed her eyes. At the same time, at the corner of her lips, a faint smile quietly revealed. That belonging to her, the tiny smile of happiness. In the far horizon, a faint star peeked out of the heavy clouds, like a young girl's innocent eyes. The next moment, the breeze blew past, a dark cloud drifted over, and again covered it. Under the clouds, 2 faint light shadows streaked past the sky, heading over this direction. Zhou Yixian leading Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist hurriedly left this morgue, which to them was a jinx, and came to the main path. Zhou Yixian, although old, his pace right now was even quicker than a young chap. Xiaohuan and Wild Dog Taoist even felt hard to catch up. After walking for a long time, the main road ahead of them gradually appeared before them. Xiaohuan, who was walking somehow breathlessly, angrily said, Grandpa, aren't you tired? Why are you walking so fast? Zhou Yixian looked at the main path ahead and again looked back at the direction of the morgue, which had already vanished, then let out a sigh, stopped and said, what do you know, this time we are really blessed, escaped from death. If we still don't know what's good for us and stay far from that morgue, then wouldn't we be looking for trouble? Xiaohuan was surprised, thought about her experience in the morgue these past few days, especially that mysterious evil person. She really felt fear in her heart, shook her head and said, didn't expect that at the foot of Qingyun Hill, there is actually such a powerful evil person. Zhou Yixian sneered, said, if it wasn't at Qingyun Hill foot, I doubt you will see it. Xianhuan and Wild Dog Taoist were stunned, said, what? Zhou Yixian frowned, as if he had suddenly recalled something and slipped his mouth, looked left and right, waved his hand and said, all right, we better leave here fast, it's better to enter the city earlier, we would not be afraid once we are at a densely populated place. Xiaohuan looked at Zhou Yixian strangely. Zhou Yixian ignored her instead and walked ahead. Xiaohuan walked faster and wanted to ask him more. Zhou Yixian suddenly coughed, looked at the sky, said, Xiaohuan, look, the sky tonight looks good. Xiao Huan cut him off. In this moonless, windy and eerie night, you still dare to say the night looks good. Zhou Yixian coughed twice dryly, quickly walked forward again. Xiao Huan stared at her grandfather's back with suspicion, felt that Zhou Yixian was not being totally honest. The three of them walked. Suddenly from behind them a gust of wind was heard, a black figure was swiftly catching up with them from the back. The three of them were shocked. In that moment they were thinking of the same thing. Could it be in this short moment of time, that devil person had actually caught them up? The three of them looked back and was stunned. The visitor was also dressed in black, but he was not that mysterious evil person, it was that shaman demon whom they had just saw not long ago. The shaman demon obviously also saw them, just that he did not mind and did not slow down when he went past them. Clearly he too wanted to be away from this place. However, when he was about to go past them, suddenly a lady's voice was heard, "Wait." The shaman demon was surprised and stopped, turned back and saw among the three of them, the two men were looking in shock at the lady standing in between them, and the lady also looked surprised, was speechless at the moment. The shaman demon assessed Xiao Huan, said, "Miss, did you call me?" Xiao Huan hesitated and said, "Yes." The shaman demon said, "What is the matter?" Xiao Huan paused. Her shout earlier was not for any other reason. Subconsciously she felt that this person was too similar to her mysterious teacher. If it's not for the fact that their auras were different, the shaman demon did not have Mr. Ghost's unique ghastly aura, she almost wanted to greet him as her teacher. But when the shaman demon asked her like this, Xiao Huan did not know where to start, and after pausing for a while, she awkwardly said, "This. Sir, do you know someone who dressed exactly like you?" The shaman demon was taken aback, shook his head, said, "I don't." Xiao Huan frowned, about to speak. Zhou Yixian instead pulled her to his back, smiled to the shaman demon and said, "This sir, young lady here do not know the ways of the world, please don't mind." Speaking, he glared at Xiao Huan, pulled her and walked away. Wild Dog Taoist saw them leaving, also hurried along. Xiao Huan looked embarrassed, but she still trying to be brave, said, "Grandpa, what are you doing?" Zhou Yixian snorted, said, "Why are you looking for trouble?" Xiao Huan's voice became smaller, secretly turned and looked at the shaman demon, saw that he was still standing there, couldn't help but whispered to Zhou Yixian, "But they really look alike." Zhou Yixian couldn't be bothered, grabbed her tighter and strutted towards the main path. Watching the three of them leaving far, the wind still carried indistinct Xiao Huan's grumbling. The shaman demon felt bewildered, after a long time, made a wry laugh, shook his head and was about to leave. However, he had just moved when he suddenly whipped around, faced the direction of the morgue. Both of his eyes had sharp glints, watching intensely. Following his line of vision, in the far horizon, two figures could be seen indistinctly pursuing each other, right in the direction of the morgue. The shaman demon hesitated for a moment, finally dismissed his curiosity, shook his head and turned around, drifted off. His instinct told him that morgue was definitely not a good place, better not to go near it. And right now in the abandoned morgue, it was still shrouded in an air of silence. Lu Xueqi slowly opened her eyes, clear and bright gaze swept around, the surroundings was quiet, there was nothing abnormal, she was relieved. Tian Buyi was still as usual, his eyes closed and sitting cross-legged at the stone stairs. At times the night breeze blew past, but for some reason, his clothes were not touched, as if the wind detoured around him. Lu Xueqi felt something amiss, her brows slowly tightening, her eyes were on Tian Buyi's body. After looking at it for a while, that suspicion in her eyes seemed to deepen. When she rescued Tian Buyi from that coffin, Lu Xueqi already realized that this big Bamboo Valley Tian teacher uncle, whom she had not seen for a long time, was much plumper in size, but the shape of his face did not change. His short and fat body was at least 2 times bigger than previously, and looking at it right now, his clothes appeared tight. However, for some reason, although Tian Buyi had always been fat, but Lu Xueqi felt that this fatness was somehow wrong, but she couldn't put a finger to it and started to feel worried. Even though she had used her powers, which secretly contained Tian Shu's amazing power and broke the coffin's confining spell, but in that few attacks, she was much stunned by the strange evil power that incarcerated Tian Buyi. The might and danger of the evil power was something she had never encountered before. Thinking of that, Lu Xueqi felt she should clarify with Tian Buyi, turning around and was about to speak, but she didn't expect at this moment. Tian Buyi suddenly opened his eyes, both eyes sharp, but he was not looking at Lu Xueqi. Instead, with his face slightly twisted, he was staring at the night sky as black as ink. Lu Xueqi felt a chill in her heart, stood up and looked up. The next moment, her body shook. In the dark firmament, a dark figure flying down swiftly, his body covered by a ball of dark energy. Before he reached, the turbulent evil power seemed to have already gushed over. Tian Bui slowly stood up. Lu Xueqi felt her mouth going dry, whispered, "Is it him?" Tian Bui slowly nodded. His deep voice said, "It's him." Lu Xueqi's eyes never left that dark figure, only a light sigh, and did not speak anymore. Only Tianya in her hand, streaks of light rotated, slowly extended. Who? A whistle in the wind, the dark figure descended from the sky, landed in the morgue, and then saw Tian Bui and Lu Xueqi standing at the entrance, was stunned, but there was no fear. The next moment zizi, strange laughing sounds were heard. Lu Xueqi looked carefully. That person was covered completely by a thick swirling dark energy. His face nor his figure could be seen clearly, and by his weird laughter, she could not tell whether this voice belonged to her amiable and discreet sect head teacher uncle. That mysterious person assessed Tian Bui and Lu Xueqi with a few glances, finally at Tianya, suddenly said, "It was her who got you out." Tian Bui snorted but did not answer, only glanced a few more times at the dark energy surrounding the person, his eyes full of fury, could not help but stepped forward. Lu Xueqi was expressionless but also stepped forward 2 steps in another direction. Both she and Tian Bui formed a horn formation, facing that mysterious person. Tian Bui's skills need not be explained, and Lu Xueqi, with her current skills, she could sing her own praises, but that mysterious person's arrogance, totally did not regard them at all, instead laughed out, and that laughter was hoarse and deep, in this late silent night, ringing out in the abandoned morgue, sounded like ghost wailing. "Tian Bui, you still dare to fight with me?" Tian Bui awe-inspiringly said, "You have already descended deeply into evil, I can only fight." That person coldly laughed, said, "You said I have descended into evil, how do you know it is not you who is in the dark?" Tian Bui raised his right hand, immediately light swirled, his magical weapon Scarlet Fire was already at his hand, like fire burning in his hand. He drawled, "This, Zhan Yin ghost energy, on your body, how many innocent lives and spirits it had taken, what's more to say?" Zhan Yin ghost energy, these 4 words were heard by Lu Xueqi, her countenance changed. What she knew was that this Zhan Yin ghost energy strange evil skill, was not from evil sect, instead was the long-lost ghost way skill, formed completely out of black art collecting living humans' essences and spirits. One could imagine how sinister it was. But this kind of evil skill, why was it on this person? It was really inconceivable. A stir was seen in that mysterious person's dark energy, a few cold laughters was heard again, as if he wanted to speak but again stopped, turned slightly and looked at the sky. Tian Bui and Lu Xueqi also sensed something, looked over, and their countenances changed. In the air, a figure descended, his flight like lightning. Before he reached, a gust of strong wind was felt, the smaller stones on the ground suddenly to tremble, with such a might, one could imagine the person's cultivation. This night, the morgue actually was a gathering of influential figures. Different figures came in a continuous stream. Just that, what's more in life, was the ripples after coincidental encounters. See, different from that mysterious person, although the momentum was powerful, but when the person landed, it was done with ease. A sharp whistle broke the silence. With only half a turn quietly, without any other sounds, he stood firmly, turned and looked at the scene. The next moment, he was stunned. Lu Xueqi was stunned too. Tian Bui was stunned too. Like a surge of hot blood, burning in his chest fiercely, Ghost Li's body could not help but waver. Before him, less than 1 zhang away, a short and fat man stood there. Although his complexion looked somehow ashen, his body strangely swollen, but no matter what, Ghost Li could still recognize him at first glance. This was someone who raised him up, taught him skills, the teacher whom he most revered, Tian Bui. He slightly opened his mouth, but there was no sound. It had been 10 years, as if thousands of words in him, at this moment, yet turned into silence. Tian Bui stared intently at Ghost Li. No, who cared about that damn Ghost Li? The person he was looking at, was only his branches numbered 7 good-for-nothing disciple, that Zhang Xiaofan. 10 years not seen, the young disciple was no longer young, even his hairline had indistinct gray hairs. Most likely these 10 years, he must not have it easy too. Tian Bui too had thought of meeting this Qingyun disciple who was kicked out again. He even thought of the lashing he would give and then a speech of earnest teachings, hoping he would turn back. But right now, maybe he was really old. The dressing down speech he had thought of, not one he could speak. His trembling lips in the end, could only turn into a faint smile and then gently called out. Lao Qi. Ghost Li's mind, had a ringing sound. This simple 2 words, seemed to collapse the wall in his heart. all of his past in front of him, the lush beautiful big bamboo valley, the bamboos rustling sounds moving with the wind. He was stunned, stood in a daze, his body slightly trembling, even Xiaowei on his shoulder was strangely quiet. His throat like being burned, but had a feeling of warmth that was not felt for many years, not so long ago, that was his most precious memory. Right now, that person, stood there, calling him teacher. Instantly, like returning to the past, that carefree ordinary young man, for that agitation burning in his chest like fire, he called out. Tears at the corner of his eyes quietly flashed. Chapter 228 Ulterior Motives Exposed. ZZ, hoarse weird laughter, was heard from the mysterious person, startled the crowd, teacher and disciple meeting again, what a moving scene. Ghostly sucked in a breath of air, whatever it was, although his emotions were stirred up, felt happiness, shock, and many uncertainties pouring in, but he was no longer that ignorant youth anymore. Very quickly he calmed himself down, just that he still could not help but glance towards Tian Bui, hundreds of mixed feelings in his heart. Tian Bui himself was also going through an emotional roller coaster, but he was much more experienced than Ghost Li, focused himself, his expression turned solemn, turned and faced that mysterious figure and coldly laughed, said, both of them are my Qingyun sect's disciples, since you dare to do such things, don't tell me you still don't dare to face them. Ghost Li was surprised, his gaze first on that mysterious person. Obviously it did not occur to him that this person had relations with Qingyun sect, but after a moment, his countenance changed, glanced at Tian Bui, his expression was complicated. And Lu Xueqi instead revealed a smile, looking at Ghost Li, he as if feeling her gaze, looked over to her. Lu Xueqi smiled sweetly, tenderness in her eyes, like reassuring, yet also like happiness. And as expected, that mysterious person, he coldly laughed twice, pointing at Ghost Li, said, why, he is also considered Qingyun disciple. Tian Bui resolutely said, he is my Big Bamboo Valley number 7 disciple, it is me Tian Bui who said it, why? Daoshuan's senior brother. Ghost Li was shocked, the expression on his face was indescribable, dumbfounded. After a long time, his eyes from Tian Bui shifted to that mysterious man, incredulously said, Reverend Daoshuan. That mysterious person, laughed, the dark energy enveloping him suddenly stirred, all scattered downwards, slowly revealing his body from chest upwards. This person had long beard reaching until his chest, his face age-old and distinct. If it wasn't that highly respected, well-known worldwide Qingyun sect head reverend, who would it be? In this short moment, Ghost Li could be said to have experienced shocks in succession. Looking at Reverend Daoshuan's face, he couldn't help but step back, his heart in a chaos but his mind in a blank. And Lu Xueqi although was prepared mentally, but when she saw this who for so many years, viewed as celestial and extremely revered Reverend's face, she was still dumbfounded, her face turned slightly pale. Reverend Daoshuan's appearance did not change, but at a glance, his expression was already completely different from the past, cold glints in his eyes, without any traces of kindness or compassion. Ghost Li looked Reverend Daoshuan from top to bottom, both of his brows slowly tightening, at the same time a sharp glint flashed in his eyes. This person in front of him, it could be said he was an important figure who changed his life. 10 years ago, that earth-shocking Zhu Xian sword at Qingyun Hill Tongtian Peak, cleaved and scattered Biao's soul and also cleaved Zhang Xiaofan into the Ghost Li today. But Ghost Li was well aware of Reverend Daoshuan's deep skills. When he joined the Ghost King sect and trained under Tian Shu, he had already understood that if he only trained and practiced Qingyun sect Taoism true ways and Tianyin Temple Buddhism supernatural powers, even if he practiced for a lifetime, he might not win over Zhu Xian formation. However, as he trained diligently, he understood more and more of Taoism, supernatural powers, knowledge and cultivation. The hope in his heart diminished day by day, especially after 10 years, that demon catastrophe. Reverend Daoshuan again made his move at Qingyun Hill, activated Heaven Seal, using heaven and earth's spiritual energies, with one strike defeated the beast deity who was like a celestial deity. It was already not what a human's strength could defeat. Just that he could never imagined, he actually met such a Reverend Daoshuan, someone emanating terrible evil power. Although he was still highly skilled, but to Ghost Li, he was already within reach. On his face, an indistinct agitation flashed past. Reverend Daoshuan suddenly turned around, stared at Ghost Li, cold glints in his eyes flashing. He had oversaw Qingyun sect for more than 100 years, his reputation well known over the world. When Ghost Li was Zhang Xiaofan, he looked at Reverend Daoshuan as if he was a celestial being. Right now being stared at like now, Ghost Li for some reason started to feel nervous, subconsciously clenched his hands into fists. You wish to kill me? Reverend Daoshuan stared at Ghost Li, coldly said. Ghost Li did not speak. With a flip of his hand, dark green light flashed. The soul-devouring stick was already in his hand. Faint light glowed, mixed with stern blood-red color, slowly rotating. For some reason when Reverend Daoshuan saw the soul-devouring stick, his lips revealed mockery. He then turned around, facing Tian Bui and asked the same question, "You wish to kill me?" Tian Bui instead was straightforward, "Yes. You think you can kill me?" Tian Bui snorted and said, "Even if I can't, I will still." Reverend Daoshuan laughed strangely a few times, his voice sharp, reverberating far, said, "That's right, at that time I could already foresee, other than me and that dead ghost Wanjiani, in this generation of Qingyun sect, whether it is talent or courage, you are indeed the number one." Tian Bui's face had a brief darkness, said, "Saying all these again now, what use it is of now?" Reverend Daoshuan's eyebrows raised, suddenly glared and shouted, "Fine, I ask you, why must you kill me?" Tian Bui's body shocked, for a moment couldn't speak. Reverend Daoxun's face for some reason, had a mournful look, incompatible with his current ferocious appearance, but yet it appeared on his face. He was coldly heard saying, "Tian Junior brother, you want to kill me, is it for the morals, ethics and justice for the people which you have always revered?" Tian Bui for so many days, this was the first time he heard him addressing him as Tian Junior brother. For a moment, his heart was confused, but he soon clenched his teeth and said, "After you degenerated into evil, commit crimes and do evil, if I don't kill you, I'm afraid you would commit even more heinous crimes." Reverend Daoshuan let out a long sigh, his voice full of mockery, and stared at him, said, "What a good righteous stern speech. Then let me ask you, if you still remember, what is the reason that I turned out to be like this today?" Tian Bui was nonplussed, speechless. Reverend Daoshuan sneered, glanced sideways at Lu Shueqi who was on alert, said, "This teacher uncle of yours refused to say, can you tell me?" Lu Shueqi turned pale several degrees yet subconsciously avoided his glare, did not speak. Yes, what was more to say? Could they say Reverend Daoshuan 10 years ago for the world's good faction, 10 years later for all of the common people, risked his life and wielded Zhu Xian sword formation, and resulted in this? This karma, right and wrong, good and evil, was so entangled and hard to differentiate, the heavens making a fool of this person. In the morgue, the atmosphere was all taken over by Reverend Daoshuan. Tian Bui initially was full of righteousness, single-mindedly intended to sacrifice himself for justice, but did not expect Reverend Daoshuan, although degenerated into evil. His skills in cultivation surprisingly did not decline, and even his reasoning and mind was still extremely clear. These few words made Tian Bui trembled and unable to make any moves. Actually all these, not only Tian Bui was well aware, even Lu Shueqi, her heart like a clear mirror, saw it all clearly. If this matter was to be really debated, Reverend Daoshuan to the world and to the good faction, had the merit of giving them a new lease of life. If this was the normal times, it would not be too much to erect statue or monument for him. However, the heavens making a fool out of him, with this bad ending, if Reverend Daoshuan had lost his mind after degenerating into evil and went around to massacre, Tian Bui and the rest, even if they were not his match, would not hesitate much, but when Reverend Daoshuan questioned them like this, made them speechless. The truth in this world, but nobody knew what to do. At this moment, Ghost Li coldly said, "The common people, has nothing to do with me. What kind of merits you have done, I do not care to, I only want, 10 years ago, that sword stroke that harmed Biao." He had just spoken. Dark green light exploded from the soul-devouring stick, instantly ice-cold air enveloped from all over, filling up this morgue. A sharp whistle in the air, Ghost Li had already wielded his magical weapon, heading straight for him. Reverend Daoshuan's countenance changed slightly, as if he did not expect Ghost Li in these 10 years to have advanced so much. With this move, the soul-devouring unhurried yet urgent, secretly containing the wind and thunder's heat, dark green light shining, it was Qingyun sect Taiji Zan Qingwei, and the realm, had already surpassed Jade Qing realm and into Shang Qing realm. And by Reverend Daoshuan's foresight, even though it was at Shang Qing realm, it was already at the peak and inching towards that legendary Great Qing realm. Reverend Daoshuan saw all these. Tian Bui and Lu Shueqi, who were also Qingyun sect outstanding figures, saw too. Both of their countenances changed slightly, couldn't help but look at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Tian Bui was more shocked. Lu Shueqi, after the shock, had an indistinct disappointment but was soon replaced by joy. The three of them naturally did not know, Ghost Li in these few years suffered setbacks repeatedly but also had chance encounters. Right now he was also the only one in the world who was trained and cultivated in the world first's rare book Tian Shu. The origins of Tian Shu was mysterious, passed down from the ancient times, contained remarkable skills and power, unpredictable. Breaking it down, the few powerful cultivated sects in the world, most of them had some relations to this mysterious book. Tianyin Temple's majority powerful skills came from Tian Shu. 4th volume, Evil Sect's various strange spells also came from Tian Shu. And Ghost Li alone practiced 4 volumes, his current skills and level of cultivation could be imagined. But although Ghost Li was not what he was previously, the person he was facing was Reverend Daoshuan, the world's #1 figure. To be able to wield the powerful Qingyun Zhu Xian sword formation, he must reach Tai Ching realm, and right now, all of them would see his real powers. The soul-devouring stick, with unstoppable might of the wind and thunder, before it reached, Reverend Daoshuan's dark layer of energy had already started to swirl, as if being forced by strong force, almost dispersed. And Reverend Daoshuan, after the initial shock, was back to normal, stood unmoving, his right hand suddenly stretched out from the darkness, 5 fingers before his body made a gesture, swept across the air, pointing like the wind. Where his hands passed, the same dark green light flashed, immediately drawing out a yin-yang taiji diagram. Once the drawing was completed, it immediately rotated unceasingly. The surrounding air was immediately filled with urgent sounds of wind. The darkness was illuminated by this drawing. Not a moment later, it had already formed a rapid vortex in the air. The soul-devouring stick arrived with a rumble, the taiji drawing blocked its way, the two collided. Both looked to have 10,000 jun of force, but at that instant, other than "tsi," a slight sound, there wasn't any other. The taiji drawing was pushed back 3 kai by the stick. Even though it was only 3 kai, it had already exhausted all of the soul-devouring stick's attack force. Unable to move forward, the dark green light gradually dimmed. Ghost Li with a long whistle, his body leapt up, the soul-devouring immediately flashed with light, flew back. Reverend Daoshuan glanced sideways, coldly laughed, his hand gesture pointed, the drawing immediately shone brightly, hit towards the person in the air. Sharp whistles filled the sky unceasingly. Ghost Li's figure disappeared and appeared, like an apparition moving swiftly. But Reverend Daoshuan seemed to have fiery eyes and diamond pupils, was not confused at all by Ghost Li. The taiji drawing kept pursuing him, and seemed to be getting nearer. Finally, Ghost Li's figure slowed, caught up by the drawing. Reverend Daoshuan's eyes flashed with cold glints. The drawing immediately exploded with dark green light, expanded at least 4 times bigger with the approaching wind, struck down from the top. Lu Shuiqi's body shook. Tian Buyi, for some reason, slowly nodded. When the drawing struck down from the top, Reverend Daoshuan's face instead changed and then followed by a strange howl. Disregarding the drawing where his powers were accumulated, he flew up. The taiji drawing hit empty air. Ghost Li had disappeared in the diagram at the same time, as if controlled by another force, also dispersed. And at that moment when Reverend Daoshuan flew up, the ground underneath the morgue emitted a loud rumble. Around 2 zhong's radius it started to quake. The next moment, like the earth dragon emerging, all of the stones and sands due to the loud rumble started to leave the ground. Even that dilapidated house also collapsed. Numerous broken wood pieces also mixed in with the stones and mud. All of these, manipulated by a huge force into a vast heavy sandstones tide, with terrifying force headed towards Reverend Daoshuan. The attack and defend momentums instantly twisted. Reverend Daoshuan in the mid-air showed no signs of fear. Watching the huge mud flow, the dark energy around him suddenly shook and then, as if it had a life of its own, rolled forward, as if being led by an invisible hand, lay down 2 kai wide dark wall. Not a moment too late, the powerful mud flow arrived, heavily crashed onto the dark wall, and this time, a shock of thunder sound in the air and indistinctly a few thin lightnings flashed where the collision was. The deafening sound shook across the sky and earth. The formless yet strong huge wind force like enormous wave descended from the sky, gushing out from the dark energy wall, towards all other directions. Instantly, everything in the morgue was destroyed. All were torn apart by this huge force and by the powerful wind into unknown directions. Even the few wild trees standing sparsely nearby, due to being within the radius of this terrible fight, were uprooted and stripped of leaves, flew backwards into the far distance. Tian Buyi and Lu Shuiqi were not common folks, had already ascended and hovering in the air, avoiding the mud tide on the ground, but the huge force in the air was like knives cutting. With their level of skills, they could actually felt that the intensity of this fight could be seen. The battle scene suddenly changed. The dark energy wall looked weak, but in the shocks of lightnings that kept flashing, slowly pressed down, and that unstoppable mud flow, inch by inch being suppressed. Ghost Li's skills even though had advanced tremendously, but seemed like he was still not comparable to Reverend Daoshuan's several hundred years of cultivation. Tian Bui looking at the scene, a storm seemed to be churning in his eyes. After a few hesitations, he clenched his teeth, the scarlet fire in his hand illuminated, following a loud shout, together with his sword, flew towards the scene. Behind him, Lu Xueqi was surprised, wanted to speak but stopped. The scarlet fire burned brightly, shrouding Tian Bui's body in it, extremely dazzling, almost like a phoenix crying to the sky, only looking slightly plump, that's all. But although the posture was somehow awkward, but Tian Bui's level of skills was not to be underestimated. With this force, even Reverend Daoxuan did not dare to dismiss. With a cry, he shifted and avoided Tian Bui's attack. The dark wall immediately scattered, again developing its owner. The huge mud flow in the air paused slightly, with a loud sound as if losing its support, immediately collapsed and fell like rain. From it a figure flashed, looked solemn but not out of breath. It was ghostly. The round of fight just now, everyone saw it clearly. Reverend Daoxuan was indeed highly skilled, ghostly with his skills from 4 volumes of Tian Shu, but it could be because of the short period of cultivation. He was still not Reverend Daoxuan Tai Ching realm match, but it was almost there, sufficient for one match. Just with this round, if it spreads around, it would be enough to shock the world and spread Ghostly's reputation. Tian Bui striking empty air with his sword, the scarlet fire's light did not diminish, instead became stronger, did a turn in mid-air, like a white halo streaking past the firmament, returned back, straight towards Reverend Daoxuan. Reverend Daoxuan's body wavered, again avoided, at the same time coldly sneered, "Why, you are able to make a move again, you have already thought through your morals and ethics." Tian Bui snorted, pausing his body, sternly spoke, "Your merits are unparalleled, but it is a fact you have committed a huge crime. I fight, is because of our founders' command. Today if you die by my hands, I will definitely end my life as thanks." Ghostly's body shook, looked at Tian Bui, feeling bewildered in his heart, but at this time, who could explain to him? Tian Bui made another long cry, the scarlet fire burning fiercely, sweeping over with unparalleled force. Ghostly saw it, frowned, hesitating for a moment, he too flew up. 2 powerful fighters cornering, Reverend Daoxuan's lifetime of cultivation and training, finally revealed. His hands making the gestures of the sword formula, either pointing or sweeping across, the dark energy at the same time, like ink, was unpredictable. It could attack or defend, as 1 against 2, blocked both of them and did not even look like it was weakening. In the fight, Tian Bui like splitting a mountain and overturning seas, struck down. The might of it also made Reverend Daoxuan avoided the sharp tip, retreated 3 kai, and taking advantage of this gap, Tian Bui suddenly recalled something, shouted to Ghostly, "Lao Qi, be careful, he still has the Zhu Xian sword with him." Ghostly was shocked. The might of the Zhu Xian sword was clearly engraved in his heart. The next moment, these 3 words like hot oil over his heart, made his blood surge. 10 years ago, Qing Yunhill summit, that green figure falling from the sky. Instantly, his eyes turned red, with a loud bellow, he charged up, each and every stroke, was using his utmost effort. Tian Bui was shocked and then comprehended, sighed silently and followed. Ghostly suddenly using his utmost effort, Reverend Daoxuan was caught unaware, for a few rounds was flustered by them, but then his skills had really transcended worldliness. Facing Ghostly and Tian Bui's attacks, he could still stubbornly gain back his advantage, although at the moment he was unable to win over them, but he did not look the slightest like he was losing. As the battle went on, Tian Bui felt alarmed. All along he knew this sect head senior brother was a peerless talent. 10 years of cultivation far surpassed him. This time he risked his life to stop him. Most of it was due to the founders, passing instructions, degenerating into evil. The person by right, his powers would be on the decline. As such, Tian Bui was prepared to perish with him. But as the fight went on, Reverend Daoxuan's powers only made Tian Bui admired him, and he even suspected, could it be this senior brother, had already reached a level where the Zhu Xian sword only affected his mind but not his skills. As the battle turned more intense, Ghostly turning more and more wilder with his strokes, Reverend Daoxuan although was making effort to defend, but he was still well protected, and even made some attacks, each also vicious. If it was not for Tian Bui, Ghostly most probably would be heavily wounded. As this critical moment appeared again, Tian Bui was feeling panic. A clear whistle was heard, the white figure floated in, without any worldliness feeling, where the light flashed, Tianya descended, propitious vapors rising. Lu Xueqi had finally too joined the battle. 3 highly skilled fighters joining hands, the situation immediately took a turn. Even how powerful Reverend Daoshuan was, he could not alone defend. Gradually the pressure like a mountain, from all directions gushed in. The three foes, not one was not an expert, the weapons in their hands, each better than the other, and Reverend Daoshuan right now, was fighting barehanded, with just his skills against the three. It already astounded the world. However, in their hearts, had a doubt in their hearts at the same time. That ancient Zhu Xian sword, right now where was it? Why did Reverend Daoshuan not take it out? And when they were gradually suppressing Reverend Daoshuan, he was bitterly holding on, and finally at the perilous moment where he was about to collapse, a cold glint flashed in his eyes, swept past the three of them. They saw it, felt a shock, but before they could react, the force from Reverend Daoshuan's hands swept towards them like an angry tide. Three of them shocked, increased strength and blocked it. And at this moment, Reverend Daoshuan taking advantage, a dark energy flashed past his face, using left hand as support, right hand erected before his chest, fingers like knife, rapidly chanted an incantation. The next moment, a dark cloud over his 5 fingertips, flashed once, second flashed, and third scattered. The night screen in the firmament, mournfully rang out in the world. As if there was some sound, in the obscure sky wailing to the sky, that mournfulness, charged up to the sky, yin energy exploded, the storm rolled. Ghost Li and Lu Xueqi saw that he was about to display some strange powerful spells, without hesitation, about to attack, but they had just moved. Suddenly an extremely weird sound, as if something burst opened. Crisp sounds of cracking, and this sound, came from their back. A shiver-like feeling, swept past the heart like lightning. The two of them paused, slowly turned. Behind them, there was still a plump figure who had already stopped. Tian Buyi's face was still what he was a moment ago, but right now, looked rather stiff. He was still standing straight, scarlet fire was still shining brightly, but his body was motionless. That extremely strange, as if the heart was tearing apart and lungs breaking, was coming from Tian Buyi. Chapter 229 Separation. Ah, a sound which seemed to be released with much difficulty, hoarse and sluggish. Tian Buyi softly cried out, his body started to tremble but soon calmed down. Only his face, the indistinct dark energy, right now was so dark that it seemed to conceal his entire face. Lu Xueqi's palms, suddenly were full of sweat. And at that moment, she finally found the answer to the question which had been bothering her, why Tian Buyi looked like he had gained weight. The long robe which appeared tight on Tian Buyi's body, now looked loose. Clearly Tian Buyi did not gain weight, his body was like usual, just that his clothes stretched tight. And right now, the back of his robe, tore open, slacked down, also brought the truth, revealed before Lu Xueqi and Ghost Li. A sword handle which looked extremely ancient, appeared out from the robe which was fluttering in the wind. It quietly lay there, stuck in Tian Buyi's back. Ghost Li's entire body started to tremble, even his lips turned pale, trembled. He looked as if he wanted to shout out something, but when the words reached his mouth, there was no sound. The intense fight just now froze like that. Ghost Li and Lu Xueqi stared dumbfoundedly at Tian Buyi, as if they had forgotten there was still a terrible foe, Reverend Daoshuan, behind them. But Reverend Daoshuan did not make a move to attack them from the back, only a hint of smile on his lips. A sneer, a finger pointing like a knife, 5 slender hands suddenly twisted, the dark energy rotated around the finger, drifted along and then finally dispersed. And the reaction to this action, Tian Buyi made a groan. His body shook greatly, entire body as if being struck by lightning, his head abruptly lifted up to the sky, carrying a despair breath. Pa! A quiet sound. Before Ghost Li and Lu Xueqi, Tian Buyi's chest, a stone knot-like stone-broken sword without its tip, stabbed out, revealing a severed sword blade. Strangely, Tian Buyi did not bleed, not a drop of blood dripped out. Zhu Xian, this unparalleled and unrivaled ancient sword, had already penetrated Tian Buyi's body. The dark energy on Tian Buyi's face seemed to have regained a new lease of life, totally revived, rampantly crawled all around, completely swallowed Tian Buyi's face. And Tian Buyi's head, slowly slacked down, drooped down to his chest. Following which, his body seemed to lose its energy. Firstly the scarlet fire lost its light, left his hand and dropped down from midair. Closely following, the short and fat body which appeared numerous times in Ghost Li's memories, wavered a few times, finally fell from the sky. Like a meteorite which had burnt out, headed towards its last destination, the earth. Ghost Li trembled, his entire body was shaking. He once thought he was already strong enough to face all of the adversities in the world, but right now in this moment, he seemed to return to 10 years ago. That despair like a savage devil beast berserk, again consumed him whole. Ah! He made a heart-rending howl, disregarding everything and pursued, towards that falling body, towards that familiar figure. His speed was like lightning. Before Tian Bui hit the ground, he caught his teacher who cared and taught him from young. Upon contact, cold, without any vitality. This was clearly a corpse which had been dead for many days, even the body's warmth was gone. Ghostly hugged Tian Bui tightly, his rough breathings became heavier, not knowing since when, his face was full of tears. Be careful. Suddenly, an urgent cry was heard from behind. Lu Shuiqi's white figure came approaching swiftly. And in the midair, Reverend Daoshuan's hand had drawn a big circle, the deep low incantations came to a stop. Ghost Li's instinctively sensed a warning, but he held onto Tian Bui's hand. The deep grief, turbulent emotions in his heart suppressed his reasonings. He did not let go. This body, this person, raised him up, taught him skills and taught him to be a man. These several decades he had always looked at this person's back figure and lived, and walked, and moved forward, that voice and smile, each and every one engraved in his mind, now like thunder and lightning hit his mind, rendering him motionless. How could he let go? Zhu Xian ancient sword lit up, the glare instantly hurt his eyes, unable to see clearly ahead, the once familiar, many years ago smell, enveloped over. In this critical moment, Lu Shuiqi exerted all her efforts, rushed forward and pulled Ghost Li and fell to the side. Rumble, like lightning shooting all around, instantly dispersed. The dazzling halo instantly restrained. Zhu Xian ancient sword heartlessly penetrated through Tian Bui's chest, flew up into Reverend Daoshuan. A powerful and slender palm stretched over, caught the sword handle. In that instant, the sky strangely darkened, even the few stars in the far horizon were also swallowed into the dark clouds. No blood, not a drop. Ghost Li was as if he had lost his soul. At the same time all feelings, woodenly crawled, towards Tian Bui. Lu Shuiqi wanted to help him but her hands stopped halfway. She suddenly rushed to Ghost Li, stopped him, her breathings were urgent, like a fear coming from deep in her heart. You look at Tian teacher uncle's hand. Rumble. In the horizon, a rumbling thunder sounded. In the thick dark clouds, it finally started to rain. Just that this rain was black color. Following the thunder, the rain which gradually became heavier, a flash of lightning streaked past the dark firmament. In the mud, Tian Bui's body, his hands, one of his fingers, twitched. Ghost Li was stunned, the grief on his face had an uncontrollable joy. He shouted, "Teacher!" He dashed over, to Tian Bui, without any cares. Lu Shuiqi was pale, her eyes were much more clearer than Ghost Li. In her shock, she quickly stretched out to stop him but could only manage to catch his robe. See, a sound tore it. In the air, the dark energy surrounded Reverend Daoshuan, all of the wind and rain avoided him. His face looked savage, like a devil deity, arrogantly looking down at the mortals, as if their lives were in his hands. The ancient sword in his hand, on its blade, a strange light flashed, reflecting on his face, increasing its mournfulness. Ghost Li, like seeing a ray of hope in his despair, rushed up madly and did not notice at all. On Tian Bui's face, not only the dark energy did not dissipated with his life force, instead it darkened, right now totally covered Tian Bui's face. And when Ghost Li rushed over, about to embrace his teacher and cried for joy, Tian Bui's hands suddenly flipped over, instantly accumulating supreme power, like a huge hammer, slammed onto Ghost Li's chest. Ghost Li's face in that instant froze. The next moment, his body was thrown backwards, pi-pa sounds were heard unceasingly. Tian Bui's lifetime of skills in this hit, one could imagine. Ghost Li without any defense, in that instant nobody knew how many bones were broken, the internal organs of the body most likely all shifted positions, suffering heavy injuries. And it was because he had practiced Tian Shu True Way, including Tian Yin Temple Great Brahman Wisdom True Way instinctively protected the body, he did not die on the spot. Even though it was so, he also flew out 3 jongs away, he saw only darkness and stars, his chest so painful that he could feel nothing. But in his mind, only a voice rang out, "What happened to teacher? What happened to teacher?" Ha 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 ha, shrill laughter sounds were heard from the sky. Reverend Daoshuan hovered in the air, laughing crazily. "Didn't you want to perish with me? Didn't you want to eliminate the evil for the people? Why, letting you have a taste of this Zhu Xian ancient sword, how is it? Ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha." Tian Bui's body slowly stood up, although his actions looked somehow slow but every movement filled with strange power. The dark energy on his face was still raging, every time giving one a feeling of chill. Tian Bui's right hand slowly stretched out, suddenly 5 fingers stretched, the fallen scarlet fire sword lit up, next moment, flew back to his hand. And after Tian Bui held the weapon, moved and headed towards where Ghostly had fallen. The black rain became heavier and faster. Kang Lang, like dragons singing, Tianya was out. Lu Xueqi, her face pale, stood before Ghostly. Her chest heaving rapidly, the rain hitting upon her skin, her white clothes dirted, yet increased her beauty. The rain fell onto the ground, turning the ground into mud. Ghostly's mouth spilled out blood, dyeing his clothes red. Even his sound also turned hoarse and he stammered, "Teacher, what happened to you?" Tian Bui did not seem to hear anything. The raging storm did not have any effect on him. His body only woodenly faced the struggling Ghostly on the ground, and Lu Xueqi's pale determined face slowly walked over. Every step filled with malevolent intention. Rumble. Thunder exploded. Above them, even Reverend Daoshuan was also startled. The next moment, his expression suddenly had an extremely strange change. Like a lost expression, as if sleeping in a long dream, before becoming conscious, as if remembering something but yet could not catch it, unable to recall and was lost. Like reflecting Reverend Daoshuan's strange reaction, the Zhu Xian sword's strange glint in his hand also dimmed. Rumble. The shock of thunder like an enormous hammer shook the firmament and the world, as if the deities in the sky were also enraged. And at this critical moment, Tian Bui suddenly stopped, and the thick dark energy shrouding his face seemed to lose its power source and receded slightly, revealing Tian Baiyu's eyes. A moment, how long was it? Buddhism said Mount Meru in mustard seed, that instant eternal. It was originally ordinary, but that moment of breath's time, what kind of instant would that be? That pair of eyes stared deeply at Ghostly, watched him struggled in the mud, blood coming out from his mouth, shouting the two words, "Teacher." Scarlet fire's light burned fiercely like fire, reflected in his eyes. That instant, how long could it be? Tian Bui flung his head abruptly, using all of his strength, found where Lu Xueqi was, stared deeply. The lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The storm was still raging. Tianya's celestial sword released faint blue light, hovered within the storm. Lu Xueqi's gaze, at that instant, met Tian Bui. Like rumble, like lightning flashed, like wild storm, like huge waves, she clearly saw, that turbulent thing like huge waves was in that pair of eyes, staring deadly at her, like limitless, in the end only transformed into silence. The next moment, Lu Xueqi turned white, even her lips also turned translucent. The shock of thunder passed, Reverend Daoshuan shook slightly, the lost expression gone, and almost at the same time, Zhu Xian's strange glint again resumed. On the earth, the storm was still screaming. Tian Bui's eyes, once again, shrouded by the mediocre dark energy. His steps heavily stepped onto the mud, spraying the dirty water everywhere, every step heading towards the original goal. Murderous air, heavy, sinister murderous intention. Tian teacher uncle, Lu Xueqi, for some reason, her voice turned extremely abstruse, indistinctly carrying a trace of grief, said, "Don't come over, please don't come over anymore." Ghostly supported himself up with his arm, looked up, but halfway up, he collapsed again into the mud splattered onto his face, but he could no longer feel it. He could only struggle to lift up his head, watched his resurrected teacher, walking step by step towards him. The scarlet fire burning fiercely, not knowing whose spirit and blood veins it was burning on. In the storm, Tian Bui approached. Lu Xueqi, clutching Tianya, trembling, her face turned paler. "Tian teacher uncle, stop, stop." Replying her was, Scarlet Fire Celestial Sword. The burning fire cleaved down from the top, instantly the rain water within 3 kai totally dried up. Tian Bui, after being controlled by some mysterious spell, his skills did not decline, instead advanced. Lu Xueqi with difficulty raised Tianya to block. Jung, a sharp sound, she, together with the sword, was thrown off by the great force, like a broken kite before Ghostly dropped down, landed behind Tian Bui. Between the teacher and disciple, there was no longer any obstruction. Tian Bui stopped, slowly raising Scarlet Fire. Ghostly although lay there strengthless, but his eyes were opened wide, staring at Tian Bui. Only Tian Bui's face was covered in black, unable to see his expression. The wind and rain raged on, heaven and earth mournful. Suddenly, Tian Bui with a bellow, Scarlet Fire exploded with light, struck down at Ghostly. Ghostly did not avoid, actually he couldn't avoid too, his mouth slightly agape, not knowing what he was shouting, just that that bit of sound was totally covered by the burning storm brought by Scarlet Fire. Rumble. In the firmament, again a shock of thunder. The mortal world was pierced through by a flash of lightning, that instant illuminated this dark heaven and earth. Tian Bui's action suddenly froze, the scarlet fire stopped only 1 kai above Ghost Li's head. Ghost Li could even clearly feel that scorching fire was about to incinerate him. But it did not. Tian Bui stopped totally, the bright fire, also quietly, receded bit by bit. At Tian Bui's body, at where his heart was, a sharp sword tip was revealed. Glowing with faint blue, the ceaseless propitious energy from Tianya's celestial sword once again penetrated Tian Bui's body and heart. The storm cut like knives, hitting upon the person behind Tian Bui, disarray hair sticking close to the skin, innumerable water beads dripping down the face, her face like death, entire body shaking. Rumble. In that instant, 3 shocks of thunder struck through the firmament in succession, all either left or right of Reverend Daoshuan. Reverend Daoshuan had a great shock, suddenly entire body curled up, agony revealed on his face. The next moment he cried out to the sky, turned into a dark light, as swift as lightning, left. On the great earth, Ghost Li once again in shock, looked dumbfoundedly at his teacher's chest, that sharp sword tip sticking out. Without any blood, not a drop. Dang, the scarlet fire lost its light, like a useless copper metal fell onto the ground. Ghost Li's eyes twitched, his body trembling. Following which, Tian Bui's knees slackened, slowly knelt and fell into the mud, just before Ghost Li. The dark energy swiftly scattered, but there was still a faint layer on his face, lingering. Lu Xueqi, clutching Tianya, also started to shake, but she did not hesitate, only closed her eyes. The next moment, Tianya's faint blue light lit up, with its 1,000 years of propitious righteous energy, drop by drop emanated out from Tian Bui's body, while chasing away the dark energy, at the same time enlarging more than 10 times the wound on his chest. Arg! Ghost Li cried out hoarsely, like a despair wild beast, tears filled his face. With strength from nowhere, his heavily injured body, like a fish, leapt up, pounced onto Tian Bui's body, pulled him away from Tianya, and Tianya at the same time, expelled the last bit of dark energy. Tian Bui's familiar face once again appeared in the storm. His eyes were opened, not knowing if he had never closed them. Then, his lips moved, facing Ghost Li, smiled. Lu Xueqi, standing behind him, seemed to exhaust all of her strength, her knees weakened, fell sitting into the mud. Ghost Li looked at the wound at Tian Bui's chest. His heart knew, his mentor who raised him up, had already reached the end of his life, there was already no hope. Why, he cried out heart-wrenchingly, rain or tears on his face, no longer able to differentiate. This time, he was facing Lu Xueqi, his body struggling in the mud, to crawl over and question her. But a pair of trembling hands stopped him. This hand was strengthless and frail, but Ghost Li immediately turned back. Ghost Li breathing heavily, his lips trembling, hoarsely crying, "Teacher, teacher." Tian Bui looked at him, his breathing delicate, like struggling to use his final last strength in this broken body, told Ghost Li, don't blame her, don't blame her. Ghost Li stretched out his hand, grabbed Tian Bui's hand tightly. What he felt was only coldness. He could no longer control, cried loudly, in this storm night, wailing unceasingly, repeating only 2 words. Teacher, teacher. Ghost Li struggled to go near Tian Bui, tears dripping onto Tian Bui's hand. After I die, you bring my body back to Big Bamboo Valley, hand over to your Shi Niang. Translator note: Shi Niang is teacher's wife. Ghost Li nodded hard, his face twisted, his body couldn't stop shaking. Tian Bui under his watch, his breathing turned more and more urgent, his voice getting softer. You must persuade her. Don't be upset. Don't do silly things. The last word, Tian Bui's voice suddenly was pitch high and then stopped abruptly. The hand which was clutching Ghost Li dropped down. Ghost Li, stunned, his trembling body also stopped, froze on the spot. The soughing chilly storm was actually that bone-penetrating cold, directly penetrating deep into the soul. Not knowing how long it had passed, he could only muttered and called out, "Teacher." And then, darkness before his eyes, fainted beside Tian Bui's body. Chapter 230. Wound. Qingyun Hill, Big Bamboo Valley. It was deep in the night, only the sound of the bamboo leaves rustling was carried over by the wind, reverberating in the night sky. The lights were long turned down. The Big Bamboo Valley's disciples had also retired for the night. Only at the back of the observed silence hall, there was still a solitary light, giving off light in the darkness by itself. The night breeze blew lightly, coming in from the half-opened window, making light woo-woo sound, also caused that lamp on the table in the center of the hall, wavered, casting light in darkness. A fair hand stretched over, blocked the wind, soon the light ceased wavering and again emitted light. Suru sat lethargically beside the table, it was already late but she did not look sleepy. The wind outside the house still kept blowing onto the door and window, frequently making light sounds. Suru stood up, walked slowly to the window but did not close it immediately, instead looked out. The firmament like ink, it was the darkest moment. She concentrated and listened, but in this late night breeze, it did not have the sound that she wanted to hear. Suru's face had a faint bitter smile, she quietly closed the window, returned to her seat. Both she and Tien Bui were not extravagant people, there were not many things in this bedroom. And on the table, other than a cloth bag, there was another small round mirror. She took the mirror over, a dignified beautiful lady appeared in the mirror, her hair thick, her skin like a young girl, without any wrinkles. She and Tien Bui as husband and wife, cultivated for a few hundred years and achieved this level of Taoism, her appearance unchanging. After looking for a long while, Suru gently sighed and placed it aside, took the cloth bag and opened it. In it were all ordinary stuff, a few needlework, a piece of cloth, scissors, powder, ordinary items that a common housewife would have, to mend and make clothes for their husband and children. Suru took the cloth, threaded the needle, using that lamp and carefully started to sew. A cold wind suddenly gusted in, that lonely lamp was immediately extinguished. Ah! A soft cry, Suru frowned in the darkness, a stabbing pain on her fingertip. With her cultivation and skills, she actually was hurt by a small tiny needle, even she herself also found it funny. Just that for some reason, in the darkness, the chilly night breeze blew past, Suru's heart felt heavy, like a heavy stone stuck in her heart. She sighed, put down the needlework, walked to the window. The scenery outside the window was still the same, however her husband who had viewed it with her countless of times, had left for a long time. After daybreak, maybe she should send Darren and the rest of them down the mountain to search, they couldn't keep on waiting like this. Suru thinking of this, an image of Tien Bui flashed past her mind, her heart felt anxious. The night was still late. She watched the sky for a long time, her lips slightly moving, not knowing what she said. After a long time, she quietly lowered her head, sighed and again closed the window. Outside the house, the wind seemed to be stronger. Majestic Fox Mountain, Ghost King Sect. The same late night, there was also someone awake, but perhaps the mood was different. Concealed deep inside the mountain, above the blood pool, Ghost King and Mr. Ghost stood side by side. Mr. Ghost was still clad in black, unable to see his expression, and Ghost King's face had uncontained excitement and delight. He did not look tired from staying up. In fact, with his skills, even if he did not sleep for a few days, it would not have an impact, and right now his face, not only there wasn't any tiredness, instead it was glowing with a faint red light, full of vitality, focusing completely on the blood pool below. Filled with fresh blood, the pool was different from the usual, again there was a change. The four great beasts were still incarcerated inside, even Teoti, which was resisting with all of its might, looked exhausted, slumped in the pool, not moving for at least half a day. And right now, the pool, which had been quiet usually, was no longer so. On the vast surface, bubbles were seen and at the same time, rupture sounds were heard unceasingly, and the speed of it was not less than 10 over times from the initial, and the number of bubbles also increased aplenty. The entire blood pool looked like it was boiling, an invisible force gradually awakening from deep inside. And in this space, the blood stench increased more than 10 times. In the air was the pivot cauldron of the four divinities' blood formation, also different from usual. The crude ancient cauldron had absorbed much spiritual and evil energies from the pool and beasts, gradually emitted a faint redness, and this cauldron, which seemed to be made of bronze, right now displayed a transparent and light yellow amber color, giving off a solemn appearance. On the cauldron, those mysterious engraved characters, each and every one of them were already lit up, as if again received life, glowing. And the center diagram, that hideous deity effigy surrounded by four spiritual beats, had been oscillating between light and darkness, was still red like blood, greedily sucking the spiritual energy provided below the cauldron. And the air around the cauldron, in this sealed chamber, still had the mist-like vortex carrying wind and thunder, powerful forces, churning around it. And even Ghost King and Mr. Ghost could still clearly feel the terrible power that this cauldron possessed, and this strange power kept on increasing. And like Ghost King, Mr. Ghost was watching the cauldron closely, but his eyes were cold and sharp. Compared to Ghost King, he was missing that fervor, more calmness. Mr. Ghost watched the cauldron for a long time, and spoke, "Now that things are proceeding smoothly, and all are as what the inscriptions on the cauldron stated, moving ahead, in 49 days, this phenomenal for divinity's blood formation would definitely be a success." Ghost King inhaled deeply, his whole face red, his eyes revealed his fervor glint, stepped forward and couldn't help but let out a long whistle, said, "Good, good, good, I am already impatient for it." Mr. Ghost glanced at him, said, "Sect head, be patient, the days are still long." Ghost King lifted his head up and laughed loudly, suddenly turned around and come to Mr. Ghost, pat his hand heavily on his shoulder. Mr. Ghost seemed surprised, his eyes puzzled but still did not move, stood where he was. The next moment, Ghost King's hand was still on his shoulder but there was nothing more, he only laughed and said, "Good, good, good." He laughed, extremely happy, then as if recalling something, he kept his laughter and solemnly said to Mr. Ghost, "Thanks to you." Mr. Ghost dipped his head slightly, said, "This unequaled formation is able to succeed, as all sect heads' good fortune, and if it's not for this hidden dragon cauldron, I am also helpless." Ghost King smiled, shook his head and said, "The hidden dragon cauldron is my Ghost King sect's valuable treasure, but for many years no one is able to comprehend the inscriptions, only you at the end gave me a helping hand, Mr. Is Heavens bestowed to me, to accomplish my dominance." Mr. Ghost was silent for a moment, said, "Sect head is too kind." Ghost King laughed, turned and again looked at that cauldron, his eyes again flashed with wild excitement, couldn't help but started to laugh loudly again. Mr. Ghost only quietly stood behind Ghost King, watched Ghost King's somehow mad demeanor, did not speak. Right now if anyone who knew Ghost King was to walk in and see, most likely the person would be shocked. Ghost King had always been ingenious and reserved, never had such mania expression, but in Mr. Ghost's eyes that was watching Ghost King, there was no shock. Not knowing if it was because Mr. Ghost had frequently spent time with Ghost King alone and so was already accustomed, or because he was someone reticent, others could not tell at all. Anyway, in this concealed blood pool within the mountain, within the thick stench of blood, Ghost King complacently planned the future. That arrogant laughter reverberated unceasingly, gradually enveloped the entire chamber. And behind him, was a silent figure. Below Qing Yun Hill, the abnormal dark clouds in the firmament had long dispersed but the layer of clouds were still there. In the inky dark sky, the rain was still pouring, washing this somewhat silent mortal world. In the wilderness, the storm in a flurry, the chillness penetrating the bones. The place where the abandoned morgue once stood, after an intense fight, was totally in ruins. Even the ground was dug up by huge force, after being washed by the storm, turned into dirty mud. The sky was dusky, there was actually not a ray of light. In the wilderness, in the storm, there was only a faint blue light, wavering slightly. Lu Xueqi, who loved cleanliness, her white attire already mud-stained but she seemed not to care at all. Not far before her, was Tian Buyi's body lying quietly, his eyes were closed, so peacefully as if he was sleeping. The storm hit upon his face, wailing sounds in the wind, as if crying. Ghost Li was still unconscious, using Tianya's faint blue light, his face was as pale as a dead person, and his expression was full of pain and anguish. If it was not for the fact that his chest was still slightly rising up and down, it would make one mistaken. Right now, his body in Lu Xueqi's embrace, Tianya quietly glowing, around Lu Xueqi and Ghost Li, it propped up a small gap, the unseen force blocking the rain. And not far from them, Xiaowei the monkey, no longer its usual self, quietly sat on the ground. The rainwater soaked its fur and water beads dripped past its face and onto the ground. A gust of cold wind blew over, Xiao Hui's 3 eyes blinked, seemed to feel cold and quietly edged near Ghost Li. Lu Xueqi quietly looked down, glanced at Xiao Wei, then stretched her hand over, gently carried Xiao Wei into Tianya's halo, let it crouched on Ghost Li's body. Xiao Wei glanced at Lu Xueqi, its mouth made light sounds of g, and then its head gently dropped down, leaning against Ghost Li's chest. Its head turned sideways, its eyes watching ahead, Tian Buyi's quiet body. Like a dream, like an illusion. That was like a long and distant dream, but it did not have the slightest joy, because until the end, it was actually a nightmare. Ghost Li's body moved, his pale face's anguish expression seemed to increase. The next moment, following a painful groan, he slowly woke up. Light in front of him, faint blue light, gently floating around him. Sounds around him, it was the storm, the wind and rain, the storm soughing. Xiao Wei suddenly straightened, looked at Ghost Li. The cold wind blew again. Ghost Li shivered and then saw Lu Shuiqi's gaze, that face which was as white as his, in this storm night, the only one beside him. Ghost Li's lips trembled slightly. The pain in his chest had lessened much. Ghost Li glanced at his chest, saw several white bandages in different sizes wrapped around, looked at they were tore from some clothes, and as his mind became clearer, he soon felt the broken bones in his chest were all mended. Just the Tian Bui's punch was something not trivial, his entire body's meridians suffered shock, although Lu Shuiqi treated him afterwards, but most likely he had to rest for many days before he could recover. With such thoughts, he subconsciously looked over, saw his mentor who raised him up. Ghost Li did not speak, he seemed not to have even the strength to talk. In the storm, Tian Bui's face was wet with water, quietly lying in the dirty mud water. Who would know, he would be like this after he died? A low hoarse cry emitted from his throat. Ghost Li's body rolled down from Lu Shuiqi's embrace, landed in the mud, and then struggled to crawl to Tian Bui. Lu Shuiqi was stunned and then instinctively moved to pull him. But when her hands touched Ghost Li was heard saying quietly, "Don't pull me." Lu Shuiqi was nonplussed, slowly took back her hand. Her gaze watching Ghost Li, following him, watched as he left Tian Ya's halo, step by step crawled towards Tian Bui. The storm was heartless, charging coldly, soon soaked his body. On the way, the mud water covered his body. Xiao Wei followed Ghost Li, watched his master's plight and seemed to be worried, frequently jumped beside him and wanted to support him, but as Ghost Li was much bigger than Xiao Wei couldn't use much strength, couldn't help but feel anxious. Gg called out. Finally, Ghost Li reached where Tian Bui was. Where he touched was long icy cold. Ghost Li gritted his teeth, his body slightly trembling. His eyes carefully assessed Tian Bui, like a returning son after many years, only to have despair. From his face, water beads dripped down, landed on Tian Bui's already frozen face. The storm intensified. His gaze slowly came to Tian Bui's chest, although his clothes had been rearranged, but that horrible huge wound was still glaring. Ghost Li, like being pierced, froze. Then, he slowly turned and looked. Behind him was Lu Shuiqi's lonely and mournful figure. In the storm, she quietly met Ghost Li's gaze, her face pale, her hands in her sleeves, tightly curled into fists, her nails digging deep into her flesh. That moment of stares, not knowing what kind of grief was it again. Ghost Li's face gradually turned vacant, even the initial anguish also disappeared, only vacant. And so he vacantly turned over, again looked at Tian Bui. The storm blew, Tian Bui's face, not knowing since when, splattered with the ground's mud. Ghost Li slowly stretched his hand over, wiped the rainwater on Tian Bui's face. When he touched the cold skin, his hands seemed to be burned, instinctively shrank back and then again stretched out, carefully, cautiously wiped the mud and rain from Tian Bui's face. And then, he supported himself up, crawled near his mentor's body, using his own chest, blocked the storm for Tian Bui, not allowing this cold bitter rain to touch his body. Lu Shuiqi quietly watched all of this, did not stop him. On her beautiful face, there was only desolation. When I was young, my family broken, Ghost Li's voice, suddenly carried over in the storm. He spoke slowly, like every word, tossed in his heart numerous times and then slowly spitting out. Lu Shuiqi quietly walked near him, and Ghost Li's body was still unmoving, still blocking the rain from Tian Bui's body. It was teacher who brought me to Big Bamboo Valley, taught me and raised me. His loving kindness, I can no longer repay in my lifetime. Ghost Li's body wavered, not knowing if it was because of exhaustion, looking as if he could no longer sustain. Lu Shuiqi's countenance changed, stretched her hand out to support him, but when her hands touched Ghost Li instead shifted slightly away, avoiding her. Lu Shuiqi's hands froze in the air. Ghost Li with effort hugged Tian Bui's body, embraced his head deeply, at the same time his face revealed deep anguish, his mouth mumbling. Lu Shuiqi stood beside him. In the storm, she was still clearly heard his words. Ghost Li only kept repeating one sentence. My lifetime can no longer repay. My lifetime can no longer repay. Lu Shuiqi's lips trembled, her eyes brushed past Tian Bui's face. Who would know, on the same night, this person once smiled and talked to her, made promises to her, allowing her in her despair to see the faint ray of hope. That single sword stroke, that single wound. The person wounded, but was more than one. She sadly smiled, turned over, her body involuntarily wavered, brows frowning, a mouthful of blood spat out. Drops landed on her clothes, and also on the ground, but the storm was heartless, not long after, eroded by the rainwater. She looked up. The cold rain landed on her face, the firmament like ink, a stretch of darkness. Wasn't it soon daylight? But why, this heaven and earth, even at this moment, other than this storm, leaving only a stretch of darkness? Tears at the corner of Lu Shuiqi's eyes, in this storm, quietly trickled down.